Hello, 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 folks. How are we doing? I hope everyone is having a great day today. Hey, Miso Soup, welcome to the stream. We're gonna get started here in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Welcome in. Hey there, Adele. Hey, Lawrence. Hey, Matthias. Hey, Copper Lily. Hey, Celeste. Hey there, Arwen. Hey, Renitz. Alrighty. Hello, hello, everybody. Hope y'all are having a good day, good weekend. Hey, Robico. Hi, everybody. We're back, baby. Oh, we're back. I've got wet hair. I was working outside earlier, and I got a bunch of like uh, grass and leaves and stuff in my hair. Hey, AJZ. Kaplan says, "How's your shoulder?" Doing okay. Not great, but okay. Well enough. I'll say that. It's frustrating when your body doesn't keep up with the things that you want to do. We'll say that, but still fortunate to be able to do everyday tasks and not be hampered in any way to do normal things like working or that sort of thing. So yes, it's probably going to be a bit of a longer journey than I expected, but we're okay. We're okay. I hope everybody's having a great weekend. Yeah, exactly, Copper Lily. Yeah, I hope everybody's having a great weekend, and I'm really excited about the project today. This is a project I've been wanting to do for a long time. Mostly, partially because it's a fun full stack project, but also because, like, genuinely, this is probably going to benefit me. So, what we're going to be building today is a project that helps you choose the right houseplants for your lifestyle. So if you're like me, I actually have quite a few houseplants that I've had for many years. But the thing is, I don't know anything about plants. So it's kind of the luck of the draw. Either I get a plant and it like disintegrates into dust within a couple months, or I get a plant and it lives for 10 years. And I really have no way to tell whether or not my houseplant purchases are going to be successful until I actually try to see if I can keep it alive. So, either one or the other. And so, something I've been wanting to do for a while is okay, wouldn't it be nice if there was an app where you could kind of choose enter some stuff about your lifestyle and then see if there's some plants that would kind of vibe with the way that you do things, whether it's maybe your house is in a really shady area, maybe you're really diligent about watering your plants once a week. Maybe you water your plants too much. Maybe you never remember to water your plants and you end up with a little pot full of sticks. And so Howard says I need a cactus. Yeah, so everybody has different styles in the way they care for plants, but I feel like everybody should have house plants because they're really beneficial for your environment, they're good for your mental health. And so if you can find plants that are good for your lifestyle, then you can enjoy them and not feel guilty when they inevitably die. So yeah, so this is going to be a really fun project. And I know we haven't done a full stack project on stream in a while, so if you are new to the stream, um, Copperly says I murdered a jade plant and then my cats murdered the replacement. I will say jade plants are hard. My dad, well, so okay, my parents are like they're practically druids. I mean, like they like live in nature. They walk, they'll walk in the woods and they're like, "Ooh, that's a sparkling Asian ash tree." And you can tell by the way the striations in the bark. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a tree." Like, I have zero clue. And they can look at a leaf that's 20 feet above the ground and tell you exactly what variety of maple it is. And I have zero clue. And so they always we've always had a lot of house plants when I was growing up and that kind of thing. And but even my parents have said that jade plants are difficult. They grow very slowly. They're very pretty, but they are also very slow growing. So no, yeah, don't blame me at all for for murdering a jade plant. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And climate is such a big factor in what plants you can have as well. Like I like to put my plants out. I have murdered a plant too by leaving it out, and I have like a porch sun, like an enclosed sunroom off the back of my house, and sometimes I'll put plants out there, and when it's nice in the summer, and but then yeah, if you take them into too late after that first frost, they're gonna just so yeah, got to be real careful about that. Yeah, so this is the app, and I've called it Greener Thumb. Now my styling prowess isn't the best, but there's a lot that this could very easily be made a lot more attractive stylistically. And yeah, and so also if you are new to my streams, I know it's been a while since we've made build a progress project here on stream, so I'll just give you a little rundown. First, kind of how these streams are structured is first I'm going to show you the finished product. So this is the finished version of the application. And if you want to see the code that builds this project, you can do exclamation point project right now in chat, exclamation point project to get the finished repo. You can look at that at any point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go right back to scratch and we're going to build what you're going to see here on stream in from scratch. So you can follow along if you like. Um, all of the code is yours to use. None of this is proprietary. I don't claim ownership of any of this code. The goal here is for you to build a project along with me, for you to feel accomplished, and for you to take that code and make it better. So the idea here is that I'm never going to show you a truly finished project. Nothing's ever finished anyway, right? The goal should always be to iterate, to improve, to be creative. And so the idea is that then you take this code, you take ownership of it, you add features, you make it better, you say, oh, that sounds cool. I'd like to add pagination. I'd like to add more results. I'd like to add a menu. I'd like to add authentication. I'd like to add more search criteria, whatever. And then you make it into your own thing and you put it on your portfolio, and you show it to other people. And the only thing I ask is that if you do decide to post it on Twitter or something like that, if you can just tag me at Mayan Wolf on Twitter, just so I can see what you made. I love seeing what folks do with my code. Just tag me at Mayan Wolf. I'm not saying you don't have to be like, oh, and this is Mayan Wolf's code. No, it's your code. You build something with it. I just want to look at it and go, oh, that's pretty cool. So that's all I ask. Other than that, it's all yours. Adele says, what if I have plants, but I don't know what they're called? Could I recognize their names consuming that site? Yeah, so we're going to take a look at so first I'm going to demonstrate the finished product. So what the app does currently. And then I'm going to show you the API that we're using, and I'll show you the features. I'll show you some of the docs, because that's what you should always do when you're first starting to build a project using an API. You should always look at the docs and understand how the API works, the structures of the data, and that's what you're going to use to build your app. So we'll look at that in a minute. Yeah, exactly. Mattel says woman in front of an elephant ear plant, kind of like man in a bowler hat. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. I got this image from Unsplash, and I thought this was hilarious. Also, too, last thing before we get started, I know I do speak kind of quickly, so if you would like closed captioning, subtitles, live subtitles on this stream, you can turn those on by hovering your mouse over the right side of the window, kind of where I'm pointing. You should see a little pop up appear with a closed caption icon. Click that, and you should have live closed captioning turned on for the stream. If that's helpful for you for any reason, I know I always watch everything with closed captions on, because sometimes I have a hard time picking out words and I like to just read along. So, yeah, if that's helpful for you, turn those on. N'est pas une plante. I like it. Hey, Strain. Yeah, happy Mother's Day, by the way. Yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Hope you're having a great day. Layered Cake says, I'm so ready. By the way, I have a young clementine tree. Ooh, and I'm so scared of killing it. It gets cold up here in New York. Yeah, yeah. And as we'll discover, this API has a lot more that it can do outside of what we're currently using it for. Again, this code is meant to be a foundation for you. So there's a lot more you can do with this API. Uh, hey, Mattel. All right. So first off, we're going to demonstrate what the app does. So it's really just very simple, single page application, and it just asks some basic questions. So first off, do you want to eat it? Meaning, is it edible, or does it produce an edible fruit or leaf or something like that that you can eat? Then, do you have pets or kids that might want to eat it? So the second question here is very important, especially for cats. Many cats like to eat indoor plants. I know that I almost made that mistake once. I when I had a full time cat, um, someone gifted me a lily. And I didn't know that it was actually poisonous. Luckily, my cat never ate any of it, but that could have been really dangerous. Certain types of lilies are poisonous. So, these are just kind of yes, no questions. If you leave it as no preference, it just won't get passed to the API as a parameter. And then how long do you want it to live? So generally plants fall in two categories. You have annuals and you have perennials. Annuals live really for 1 year or season, and then they die. They spread seeds and they die. Perennials come back year over year. So for those, we've got preferable forever, which is a perennial, and then I'm here for a fun time, not a long time, which is annuals. And then do you water your plants? I have a regular schedule every so often, or maybe if I remember, but don't count on it. And then how much sunlight do you get? Either full sun, all shade, or equal parts sun and shade. Until says, so you have a part-time cat. No, no, not right now. Okay, so for example, let's just go ahead and run this wide open and we'll just see what we get back. All right, so we get, oh, my default image didn't work. We'll have to check and see what's going on there. But so we get, a few choices back. We get a couple varieties of elephant ear. There are two different varieties you can see. We get a plant called Jacob's Coat, and it kind of tells you just some basic details as well as a thumbnail image. Now, what's supposed to happen is if the API doesn't return an image, it's supposed to display like a default image there. So don't know why that's not working, but let me just check that real quick. Huh. Okay, well, we'll figure it out. Anyway, fun time, not a long time. Yeah, contract a haircut. Brondo, it's what plants crave. Yeah, absolutely. Amazing movie. Yeah, and so if we run this again, okay, now that worked. Now it gave me an image. So we can see we get different choices, if we keep running this. That's weird. That must be a genuinely broken image because you saw my default image popped up. So if I keep running, if I keep, just submitting this wide open over and over, I'm going to keep getting different results, which is what we want. We want to, show people a variety of options, and, an image of what it looks like, right? Because what it looks like is important. Submit again. Lots of elephant ear plants. They really like elephant ears, I guess. But yeah, so that's what you get. And so now we can kind of filter it down a little bit. So let's say, all right, let's say I want something edible that I can grow in the house. Say yes, submit that. And so now I get like a fig, I get a sago palm, I get an ornamental pepper. And we can see this one, the API didn't return an image, so I get my little default placeholder, which I had Dolly generate that for me. So thank you, Dolly. Let's say we want to make sure that the plant isn't, we can do, let's say I want to be able to eat it, and it also shouldn't be poisonous. I don't know, maybe these two are, I feel like these two should be kind of always in line with each other, but maybe not, right? Because onions are poisonous. Onions are poisonous to dogs, right? So if it's poisonous, yeah. Okay, so with it, when I do that, I only get figs back. as far as things that are suitable for me to eat, as well as pets or kids. How about let's look at some let's look at annuals. Yeah, so we get only get two results there. How about let's someone said earlier they think they need a cactus. So let's see about all right, you don't remember to water your plants. Submit that. So we get some aloes. Do that again. Yeah. Aloe, jade. There's your jade plant. There's your jade plant. We get an asparagus fern. So yeah, we get a lot of different options here, and you can kind of see what they look like based on the images. What about if we're all shade all the time? Oh, internal server error. Okay, interesting. Hmm. I hope I didn't hit my API limit for the day. We'll see. Oh, I might have actually hit the API limit for the day. I've been testing this like all morning, so I might have hit the API limit. That's okay. If need be, I'll just I can sign up with a alternate email, and then I'll just create a new account. Um, but anyway, you get the idea of how it works. Because I think this API for free accounts, it's limited to like 100 requests per day. So you know, I might have hit that limit. But anyway, let's look at the API itself. So this API, if you want to take a look at it, you can. I'll put the link in chat here. Spam that link a couple times. And like I say, you can. This is a free API. I'm never gonna do anything here on stream that's gonna be costing you money, but there are limitations on how much you can access in the free tier. So we're on the API docs here. And if you scroll down a little bit, like with most APIs, it's going to kind of show you how to. It's going to kind of show you how to use it. Is my volume low? I'll correct that if it is low. I'm seeing my levels look the same as they usually do, but is it low today? Yes. Okay. I apologize. Hang on. Let's see. 1 second. Okay, I bumped it up by about 3 decibels. Any better? Also move the mic a little bit closer. Better? Okay. Let me know. Yeah, I'll move the mic a little bit closer to my face. Hopefully that's a little better. I bumped up the mic volume in my mixer here. I'll bump it up one more. Just all right. Oh, Copper Lily, thank you so much for the sub. I appreciate that. Hope you're having a good day. Thank you so much, Copper Lily. I really appreciate having you here. We're gonna do the sub screen. There you go. Thank you so much for subscribing. You're very cool. Good to have you here. All right. So, like with most APIs, and I'll zoom in on this a little bit, it's kind of small. Like with most APIs, they have documentation. So, whenever you're starting with a new API, the first thing you should always do is you should check out the documentation wherever it is. And it's going to show you things like how you do a GET request, right? How do you get data out of this API? Do you need a key? What are the sort of parameters that you can pass into the API? What does some data look like when it comes back from the API? So generally, you're always going to want to look for the response and how that response is formatted. So some folks have been asking questions about, okay, what can we actually get out of here? Well, here are all the parameters. So the parameters are the types of things that you can specify within the API. So for example, you have to give it the key, but you can also say, do you want to see a certain page number? Do you want to see, do you want to look for a certain name of a plant, right? We could search for that. We could say something like, okay, what are the characteristics of a common silver fir? Is it edible? Is it poisonous? And they even give you examples of how the URL should be formatted, right? So, for example, if you want to see whether something's edible, you would say species list, and then your key, and then whether you're edible, whether it's edible, what type of cycle it is. So, is it perennial, annual? There's other options here for biennial and biannual, but as far as I remember, there weren't very many plants that even had these as categories. So, I just stuck with perennial and annual. How much should it be watered? How much sunlight should it get? Sunlight should it get? And then whether it's indoor. Now, since our app is built to only find indoor plants for people, I have this option. We're going to see when we build this out that the that this option is always set to indoor equals 1. Drunk Uncle Grandma says, "Param, does it eat people?" Yeah, feed me, Seymour. Anybody get that reference? And then yeah, and so somebody asked earlier, we were talking earlier about you put your plants out on the porch or whatever, and then you don't bring them in soon enough before the first frost, and then they die. Well, you could even control for hardiness if you wanted. The current version of the app doesn't do this, but you can set your hardiness zone. You could have the user set their hardiness zone if you wanted. So that's an additional feature that you could add. And then this API can also find plant details. So this is a feature that the app doesn't currently have, but the idea would be that when you see the results here on the right, that maybe you could click on one of those results and get a bunch more information about that specific plant. You're like, oh, that looks pretty. I think I would like to, I think I would like to maybe get one of those. And so maybe you could click on it and get a whole bunch more information. Things like, what are its dimensions? Like, how tall does it grow, right? That's important. Could it fit on your shelf, or does it need to go in a big pot on the floor? Water requirements. When should you water it? How often should you water it? Should you prune it? Can you propagate it? Can you take a cutting and plant it and get another one? Does it have flowers? So a ton of information about each individual plant. Yeah. Plants are never truly dead. They always live on in your heart. Yeah. Oh, I know it shows my key. It's that's not a big deal. I think I've hit my API limit for the day anyway. I'm probably during our first break. I'm going to sign up with a different account, and I'll have to get a new key anyway. Um, but yeah, so and it even gives you like a description of the plant itself. So I think somebody asked who built this API. You can go to the website and you can read about it. It, it's all there for you to read about. There's things like a plant disease list that you could look at. There's so these are like paid features though. So start below here. There's more information like a plant guide and a plant hardiness map, but those are premium features, so we're not going to be looking at those at all. We're only going to be looking at free features because that's how we roll here on stream. We're free, baby. So Mohammed says, "Oh wow, you have videos about I do have videos about TypeScript. Not all that many of them, but I do. Yeah. By the way, if you are new here, please check out my YouTube archive where you can watch all of my past streams ad free. So if ads annoy you as much as they annoy me, head on over to my YouTube, watch my whole archive ad free. Exclamation point YouTube for a link. Yeah. Adele says, could we have some considerations when dealing with plants, especially some plants release some caustic liquid? We can only do what's in the API. So if you can find something in the API about that, that's why we read the docs, right? That's why we look at the docs to say, hey, does this API have all the features I want it to have? Yeah. All right. So let's see. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and test this. Let's see. I'm just going to see if I did indeed hit the limit for today. Yeah, so I did. So we can see here the response I get back from the APIs surpassed API rate limit. It's only 100 requests per day, and like I mentioned, I was testing this earlier, so whoops. Aw, thank you, Mr. Friend. No worries. Okay. So this is our API. This is what we're going to be using. Any questions on this before we get into kind of the structure of what we're going to be working on. Also, too, if you're new, feel free to ask questions at any point. This isn't just me talking at you. I'm going to be engaging with chat. I'm probably going to be asking chat questions at various points too. Type error dev says, is there a way to circumvent the API limit? Well, I'm certainly going to try during our first break. I'm going to try to create another. I'm going to use a different Gmail account and see if I can't get a fresh a refresh on that limit. Because yeah, I kind of thought of that earlier today, and then I was like, no, there's no way I'm close to hitting 100 requests, and yep, turns out I did. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for the subscription, Robico. Wow, thank you, Copperly. Thank you, Robico. Thank you. You're very cool. Thank you so much for the sub. Great to have you here. Type error says, are the limits tied to the API key that's used? Well, not strictly, no. It's, I think, you know, I could generate a new key right now. And I'd still think it would tell me I hit the limit. I think it's more of an account-based deal. Mr. Friend said, I do have a question. What is the name of the amazing SQL practice website? Sorry, off topic. A lot of folks use SQL Bolt, SQL BOLT. Other folks use, so I have used W3 Schools, which has a free SQL course, you know, for a teaching tool. So yeah, SQL Bolt is awesome. I've heard excellent things about it from folks, so I would recommend checking that out. That seems to be the sort of the universally recommended SQL learning tool. Yeah, so we've kind of seen, you know, some of the things the API can do. We are going to be primarily using this section right here, which is the plant list. So this kind of method of access. Although I do think, again, the next logical step would be to, you know, you get back a list of plants using this type of request here, this plant list request. And then when somebody clicks on a plant, then we would want, you know, in an ideal situation, we would want to make a second request to get all the specific details of the plant that they clicked on. But we're not going to be doing that today. We won't have enough time. I can already tell. Yeah. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to hydrate real quick. Oops. Or I could just, you know, spill tea everywhere. That works too. 1 second. Alrighty. Whew. Oh, yeah. And thank you for sharing that type error. Oh, thank you for the stretch. There we go. Can't go gremlin mode too early. Mystery.nightlab.com is basically a clue version of SQL. Oh, that's fun. You have to solve a murder by using SQL queries to pull the data to get the clues. Yeah, that's super cool. RDT says cup of tea. Yeah, cup of tea. I always drink tea while I'm on stream. Definitely. I drink so much tea, you guys. You have no idea. All right. So I've got a SQL. I've got a window pulled up here. Let's rearrange my windows here. So this, again, this is the finished version of the app here on the right. And get my notes pulled up over here. Hey, Mark White, good to see ya. Oh, that's a fantastic question. Okay, I'm going to answer Mark White's question first. They say, "Hi, Mindwolf, longtime lurker here. Hey, no problem. Good to have you. Good to have you in chat." They say, "I don't have a creative bone in my body. Could I still become an effective coder?" Absolutely. And I don't believe for a second that you don't have a creative bone in your body either. Creativity doesn't always manifest itself in the same way for everyone. You can be creative in writing code. I mean, without, you don't have to be a good drawer or a good, you know, fiction writer to be considered creative. Code itself can be beautiful and creative too. So I am, my drawing skills, you know, stagnated somewhere in high school. I used to draw quite a bit. I did a lot of art in high school, and then I just stopped when I went to college, and you know, you get more deep into the STEM stuff. But I express my creativity in other ways now. And I'm actually a back-end developer. So my day job is not web development. My day job is back end database SQL development, like the least visual type of software development, I would say. A lot of it is very logic based. A lot of it is very there is no visual component to it. The user never sees the direct results of what I'm coding. So there's no design component to what I do all day at all. It is very much what is the logic, what is the architecture, what are the gears underneath the surface of what the user actually sees. Monarch 365, thank you so much for the sub. My goodness. Holy cannoli. Thank you so much. Great to have you here. You're very cool. Thank you so much for stopping by. Love to have you here. Wow. Y'all are generous today. Thank you so much. So I guess what I'm getting at there is, Mark, that doesn't mean that the code that I write for my day job is not creative. There is beauty in doing something in a way that nobody's ever thought of before, and combining code elements to be efficient and fast and easy to read all at the same time. There's creativity in taking something that somebody else wrote and automating it, or taking something that someone else wrote and streamlining it in such a way that somebody else goes, why didn't I ever think of that before? That's amazing. How did you do that? That's creative. That's you thinking outside the box. That's you rethinking processes. That's a different type of creativity. There's creativity when I build a particularly well-designed ETL pipeline that just works the first time. And rethinking how to refactor something, that's all creativity. It's just creativity in a non-traditional way, in a way that's outside of deliberately making art. Yeah, exactly. The creativity that's used for backend is more so on how solutions are created. And so, yes, you can absolutely, build beautiful, clean, efficient code, and that is creativity in a nutshell. Yeah. And if you're talking about more of like, okay, but how do I want to be a web developer? Can I still, build apps if I'm not creative, which again, I don't believe. But maybe what you mean to say is that you're not experienced with front end design. Maybe that's a better way to put it. You're not experienced with front end design. That's fine. There's tons of templates out there that you can build from. There's tons of front end is one of those spaces where there's so many tools to help you hold your hand while you make decent designs. There's frameworks like Bootstrap, like Tailwind, that have all of those elements built in and have layouts that you can just copy from. That have layouts on their websites. You can just be like, oh yeah, that's an efficient layout. I'm going to use that one, and then bam, you get a good looking front end. You can have I use ChatGPT to help me write CSS because I am no good at CSS, and I know that. And if I want to make a quick layout in CSS, I just say, hey, ChatGPT, I need a grid with 2 columns, and I want my buttons to be this color and this size and this font, and I want just this general feel. And then I just tell ChatGPT, make it look good, and it gives me a good starting point, which I can then tweak to kind of get what I want. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can be creative outside of the traditional design space. And if you want to get better at design, you can always start from seeing what other people are doing and then, tailoring that to your preferences. So I hope that helps a little bit with your question. But yeah, I think it's important that we don't tell ourselves that we are not creative or we're not good at something, that and say that we just can't do that, because I think that that's very self-limiting, and that just means that you're gonna tell yourself that you can't. I can't be a coder because I can't do design. Well, that's absolutely not true. Good. Hey, Carly C, thank you so much for the follow. Good to have you here. Yes. Yeah, exactly. As Type Error said, you can look for inspiration from different styles from other sites. Yeah, you'll see designs that you like all the time, and usually they are on the modern web anyway. Most designs aren't created from scratch. That's just how it is. On the modern web, so if you see a design you like on a website, I would probably bet that if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you're going to see what framework they used. Like they'll have a little credit for, like, created by Tailwind or a particular designer, and then they'll have a link to that site, and you'll be able to see the layout that they started with. Yep. we're always the thing with coding is that we're always standing on the shoulders of giants at this point. You're always using someone else's design, starting with someone else's design. The important thing is that then you build off of it and you make it your own. There's no harm in that. Yep. Good, great question. Fantastic question. I love it. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Yeah. So what we're going to do, how we're going to build this today is, I think, this would be a fantastic, this type of app would be a fantastic candidate for um, using React, probably. Honestly, I sort of just building, I was just sort of coming up with this as I went. I didn't really have a end game for this particular app, but this is probably a fantastic candidate for React. However, we are going to start it out in just traditional EJS, because it really doesn't, it's not that complex, but it would be a great candidate for React. If we wanted to do a conversion, and we might do a conversion, we might build this first in EJS with just a regular server, and then we might, port it over to React in the next stream. We'll see how things go. That might be a fun project. We haven't done React in a while on stream, so let me know what you guys think about that. And this might be a fun conversion. Web developer says you will learn web dev in 6 months if you're dedicated and have good discipline like mine. Well, I didn't learn web development in 6 months. I didn't do that. That's not how I did it. Hey, Holly Luck, good to have you here. Welcome. It's important not to put time limits on ourselves when we're learning something new, because then all that does is it sets you up for failure when something unexpected comes up, and then you're like, oh, I can't do it, and then you quit. So I would never put a time limit on myself when I'm learning something new. It's more about, did I actually learn the material rather than racing the clock. React Native next. Yeah, I haven't gotten into React Native. I'm afraid I can't be the authority on that, but Maseda says, when I work on client work, welcome, Maseda, by the way. Hello. When I work on client work, I use AI heavily, but I'm still learning in class 32. Am I cheating? I can't tell you that. That's not, something I can be the judge and jury on. I will say, be careful. If you are still learning and you are using AI, that's fine if it's helping you complete your contracts and get paid. Like, I'm never going to be like, oh, don't get paid. Like, hell yeah, get paid, get money, right? Like, that's important. Do what you got to do to get the dollars. But also be sure that you are also, when you're learning the concepts, when you're like, going through the actual course material, doing the homeworks, make sure that you're not using AI when you do those. I don't care what you do for your clients. Like, yeah, hell yeah, get the money. But like, when you're actually doing the homeworks and going through the class materials, do those clean, do those vanilla, no AI. Unless you need AI to rephrase a concept for you, but AI should not be writing code for you at this point and, doing the homework for you. So just be careful, because otherwise you're not going to learn the material. Yeah. And there's no time, you can't ever finish learning web dev either, right? As soon as the 100 devs was over, like, I moved on to React, I moved on to TypeScript. There's no end to any of this, and that's the best part about it. Nobody's ever going to be the best at web dev, no matter what they might say on Twitter or LinkedIn. No worries, Miss Seda. Yeah. Good. Congratulations on the clients, by the way. By the way, Adele says, but what about setting an estimated time for tasks that we need to do to learn something? Um, Again, time limits can be dangerous. You should keep yourself on track, right? You should make sure that you should try to hold yourself to some kind of general study. Like, you should allocate time in your day to study and to work and to review, but the onus should be more on, do I actually understand what I learned, rather than, oh, I spent 2 hours on this, I need to move on to the next thing. It's more of, okay, wait, do I actually, if I were to do my Anki, if I were to ask myself this same question tomorrow, would I still know the answer? So just be careful that you don't push yourself too quickly and ignore whether or not you're actually learning. Yeah. Hey, Raytheon. Oh, that's fantastic. They say, I'm a new follower here. Welcome. I'm so grateful to have joined today's stream. Like you, I'm a total backend senior architect, Major League Cloud applications. Very cool. Thanks for considering sharing this on stream. Yeah, I've done some streams teaching basic SQL and things like that. The focus of my streams really aren't on the things I do for my day job, because mostly because I don't want to do like the things that I do for work on the weekends. Like, there's a little bit of a like a work life balance thing there. Like, I like to do fun things on my weekend streams, and for me, fun things are web development because again, it's not what I do for my day job. So it's just something different, right? It's nice to have a separation of those two things and to still practice skills and learn things about coding on the weekends, but it's not what I do during the day. But yeah, I've done streams on basic SQL. I've done streams where we build out some basic SQL databases, um, and build up some tables and stuff. Um, but I mean, my focus is generally full stack web dev. Oh, okay, I understand. All right, so the front end part, yeah, getting better at front end, of course, absolutely. I get where you're coming from, Raytheon. Yeah, so I have a ton of streams. If you want to look at my YouTube channel, exclamation point YouTube. So if you're interested in, building full stack React, building full stack TypeScript, yeah, just a crap. I have like 2.5 years of projects at this point on my YouTube archive. So yeah, dive in. Mohammed says, Mind Wolf, do you think Twitch is a good place to learn English? Sure, as good as any place else, right? Any place where you're listening to people speak and you are able to practice typing English, and sure, it's not going to be bad. Ahmed says, "What are we building today? We are building an app where you can determine a good type of houseplant for your lifestyle." Thank you, Mawe. I'm glad you like my Star Trek passion, and oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, and yeah, have a good night. Thanks for stopping in. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. So, again, we are going to be doing this. This would probably be a good candidate for React, but we are going to be doing it in EJS for starters, and we might convert it to React next time. We'll see how things go. Um, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and set up our basic structure. So, what are some of the things, real quick, chat? Remember, I'm going to be asking you questions. What are some of the things we're going to need if we want to make this a full stack application using EJS? Node, we're going to be using Node for our server. We're going to be using EJS. We're going to be hitting this API. So we won't need a database for this because we're going to be hitting the API. But we're going to be using Node and EJS. So what are some things we're going to need? And I'm talking about structure, like file folder structure, that type of thing. What are we going to need? What files? What folders? What are we going to need? Yeah, we're going to need a server, right? We're going to probably need some views. Yep. Yeah, probably need a public folder. Public EJS. Mohammed says EJS is like Express. EJS is a view engine. It allows you to dynamically update a front end page with information from your server. So we'll see. We'll talk more about that when we get there. Yeah. Okay. Great. Lots of great suggestions there. We've got indexes. We've got views. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do want to briefly mention, I saw in chat there asking about MongoDB. So Hollylook, MongoDB is a document-based database. So it is technically non-relational versus like a SQL database, which is relational for categorizing. Now, a MongoDB database, oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Mark Wright, for this sub. I appreciate that. Wow, 6 months. That's so generous of you. Thank you. So MongoDB can be made relational, and there's all sorts of arguments we can get into about this. But what? FR Major Shepherd, thank you for the sub. You guys are being crazy today. This is the second stream in a row where I've had a hype train. This is nuts. Thank you so much. Y'all are nuts. Thank you. So kind of you. Wow, you all are very cool. FR Mark, thank you so much, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. My Twitch is actually like glitching out because y'all are just spreading the love. Oh, this is my favorite stream. Thank you, Strain. Thank you, Mister. Yeah. No, I mean that makes me happy. Thank you. That's so kind. Wow. Sorry, I'm catching up with chat. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so MongoDB is a document-based database. It can be made relational. You can make relationships between the documents, but by default, MongoDB is not in the traditional definition of databases. However, a table-based database, like a SQL database, is going to be relational. You know, when you're dealing with tabular data. Yeah. Okay. Kick it. All right. Some great suggestions there on some structural items that we're going to need. Um, thanks, guys. Love my chat. Yes, it's document based, exactly. Um, yeah, there's all sorts of distinctions you can draw, right? When you're talking about these things, it's nobody likes to argue semantics more than developers, right? Yeah, let's talk about acronyms. Zazie Dub, thank you so much for the follow. Okay, so yes, you all are exactly right as far as structure. So we're probably going to need a public folder. What is the public folder going to do? And I'm, here I have my base folder here. What is the public folder for? What do we generally use that for? We're probably going to need and while I'm talking, I'm going to keep building this out, but we're going to probably need a views folder. Yes, exactly right. We're probably going to need a server.js folder or file, sorry. We're going to use server.js instead of app.js, although you could call it either one. It's going to be the same thing essentially. Thank you, Zaze. Yeah, so yeah, we can use so our public folder is generally going to be used for what category of things do we generally put inside of our public folder? What category of things do we generally? You could put a lot of things in the public folder, but what category of things is it generally used for? What do we call that? The types of things that we put in our public folder. Yeah, you're giving me examples of those things, but yes, Hollyluck, exactly. We put things that are static inside of the public folder. Static. So static means basically things that don't dynamically update themselves. So things like our client-side JavaScript or our styles, right? Our CSS or static HTML pages, right? Just kind of or images. Yes, exactly. We're going to be putting some images in there. So yeah, those are types of things that we would put in our public folder. Now, in our views folder, what is something we would put in our views folder, particularly given the framework that we're using today? What are we going to be putting in our views folder? What type of thing? Yeah, we're going to be putting our EJS file in there, right? Yeah, because EJS is going to be our view engine. It's going to be the thing that's going to render the view for the user, what the user sees. Right? And we know from MVC structure, from model view controller structure, that the view, the vocabulary word view, means it's the thing that the user sees when they look at the page. And so EJS is going to render our view. And so we're going to put all of our EJS files in the views folder. Now our server.js is going to go at the root. So I've got at the root of my folder here. All right, what are some other things I'm going to need? What are some other things I'm going to need? Some other files. To make sure that my full stack project is kind of following our standard conventions here. So forget about the specific EJS and images and stuff that are going to go in here. What else do I need at the root? Ooh, yeah, we're probably going to want a gitignore. Yeah, we're probably going to want a gitignore file, right? Why do we want a gitignore file? Why do we want a gitignore file? What does that do for us? Or sorry, gitignore. Yeah, gitignore file. Yeah. Yes, we'll also want a .env file. Yeah. Yeah, so it's important to, so we need both of these things, right? We need a .env file and we need a getignore file, but they do serve different purposes, right? Yeah, exactly. As Matthias says, getignore hides stuff from getting pushed up to GitHub. It hides stuff from, well, it hides stuff from the repository in general. So some things that we would want to put in our getignore are things like our .env, right? Because what our .env does is holds our secrets, like our API key. So our .env file holds our secrets, while the getignore hides things from the repo. So they do serve different purposes, and it's important to understand the distinction, but they do work together. Yes, with newer versions of Node, that's correct. You don't need .env files, but not everybody's going to be on the most recent version of Node, so I'm sticking with .env for now. But eventually, yes, we'll migrate off of that, and we will stop using .env explicitly. Yep. Yeah. Okay. And we're going to add something else to our getignore a little bit later, but for now, I'm just going to save this. I've added my .env, so that way when I do create my Git repository, I'm not going to be pushing my secrets up to GitHub accidentally. I have absolutely done that before, and it sucks every single time. So don't want to do that. First thing you should always add to your getignore is .env. You should always make sure you have a .env file and that you're putting your secrets in there. Yeah. Yes, it's not detrimental to use .env. Absolutely not. It still works just fine, even if it's slightly redundant. Adele says, don't we need a node folder? Yes, but we don't create that ourselves. So that's not part of our initial structure. We'll create it in a minute, but now folks are suggesting some other types of folders, like a model folder and a route folder. But let's think about this a little bit. The model folder, if we're talking MVC structure, so it's important not to just to actually think about what we're trying to get at here, right? We know that MVC is model view controller and that model is for things like database files. But I'm going to ask you guys, are we using a database here? Correct. We are not. So do we need a model folder? Yeah, we're essentially replacing a database we create with an API. Exactly. Yes. We don't need a model folder. Mm-hmm. And also remember, this is a single page application. So do we need a routes folder? Yeah. Why don't we need a routes folder? What's a routes folder for? Exactly, Mr. Friend. Yes, we're not routing to any other pages. Yeah, it's a single page. Yeah. Exactly. So when you're planning out your structure, it's important to only it's basically like minimum viable product, right? We only want bits of the structure that we're actually going to use. Because if you just try to follow like a pattern and set up an entire structure that has all these folders and elements you don't need, then you're just going to get confused. You're going to put things in the wrong place. You're not going to be sure what you're going to need. So yeah. All right. Yep. Keep it simple, indeed. Yeah, single page application, so no routes needed. Raytheon says, Mine Wolf, how are we controlling the flow if we don't have a controller for this controller mapping? This is going to be entire. So this is going to be the server is going to be handling the logic of talking to the API. So our server is going to handle the logic of talking to the API, and it's going to pass data to our view. And since we're using EJS can dynamically render our view with the appropriate HTML based on the data it's getting from the server. So EJS is handling some of that rather than having to sort of hard code HTML into some client side JavaScript and and conditionally render specific elements using client side JavaScript. EJS can handle that, with it having enough logic to dynamically render bits based on what it's getting from the server. So EJS is helpful in that way. It's not as smart as React, but it can absolutely render out appropriate HTML based on what it's getting from the server. Yeah. All right, so this is our basic structure. We don't need to add anything else here. Now we're going to go ahead and configure our, we're going to go ahead and start kind of setting up our packages and things that we're going to need. So what's the first thing I do when I set up a new full stack project? No, we don't need a utilities folder. Yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and do npm init. Now, whenever you're doing npm init, you always want to make sure that you're in the correct folder so we can see that I am in my specific folder for this project. So you want to make sure that you'll cd into that folder if you need to. So yes, we're going to go ahead and do npm init. Oh, and I should have done npm init -y, but whatever. I'm going to go ahead and enter through the prompts here. Yep. Pull this over a little bit more. Yeah, so we're in the root folder here and we've done npm init. So now that I've done this, we can see that my package.json file has been created. So this is automatically created. We did not create this ourselves. You should never create this yourself. It will automatically be created by npm. Now, since I'm building a full stack project, what are some packages that you can imagine I will need for this project? What are some packages I'm going to need to install? Express, maybe cores, what else? Now, again, we're thinking minimum viable product here, so strictly to make it work. Not things that we think might be nice, but strictly what I need to make this thing run. .env, we already talked about, yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, so at the bare minimum, I'm gonna need Express, so I can do npm I express.env. Yeah, and for now, we're just gonna install those two. I actually don't think I'm gonna need anything else. Hang on, I'm checking. Oh, wait, no, I am gonna need one more thing. I am going to need one third thing, and it's not something that anybody has said yet. So, not something anybody else has said yet. What's the other thing I'm going to need to install in order to make this work the way we've already discussed? EJS. Yes, Hollylook said, yes, Hollylook just said it. EJS, exactly. So, the three packages I'm installing are express.env and EJS. Now, could you install other things? Could you use NodeMon? You absolutely could. Are we going to? No. We could use more. Yeah, we could use extra things like Morgan. Those, but again, those are all extras. The app will still work perfectly fine without them. So it's important also to think about, again, talking about minimum viable product. Yes, those are nice, but are they necessary? No. So I'm going to install express.env EJS. And now that I've done that, you can see I get my package lock file. And if I go into my package.json, I can see those three dependencies right there. Yes, and Node itself now does have watch mode as well, so we don't even explicitly need NodeMon anymore. And I actually don't use NodeMon anymore. I used to. I don't anymore, just because having that luxury of the automatic refresh when you save means that there's been a few times when, if it doesn't work, then I'm like, oh wait, well, where's my changes? What happened? And it's just I needed to restart my server, so I don't really use NodeMon anymore. Raytheon says, mine will be handling any logging. Is that necessary or is included in one of those packages? We're going to, the console will still throw errors. We'll still be able to see them in our console here. We can also console log explicitly any elements that we want to. And we can always use the inspect option in the browser. If it's a browser side error, we can always just inspect in the browser and see errors in the browser console too. So we're going to get a lot of automatic logging. If you are building something really large and complex and you want really specific types of logging, then you can install a package like Morgan, which can give you some really specific control over your logs. But for the most part, it's not needed. Yeah. Yeah. And we can install, Bootstrap for styling. We could install Tailwind, but again, not needed. We can just do basic styling with CSS. Okay. Let's keep this over here. So we've got our packages installed. I think that's about it. We've got our env, we've got our git ignore. Another thing I'm going to do is in my public folder, I'm going to go ahead and drop in the images that I'm going to be using for placeholders. This is just setup stuff. You can head over to the GitHub, do !project for the repo, go into the public folder and the image folder, and you can grab those two images and put them in your structure as well. I'm just going to drop those in before I forget. Oh, I need an image folder. Whoops. So in here, I'm going to create a folder called image, img, and I'm going to drop in my two placeholder images. So these are just a placeholder image when the API doesn't return a valid image, and then the main splash image for my homepage. Web developer says, do we need ESLint and Prettier? You can install them if you want, but again, not necessary. None of that is necessary. Yeah, I actually don't know what type of plant this is. I think elephant ear, maybe? Monstera? And no, Monstera has like fringes on the edge. I think it's an elephant ear. But yeah, don't know. Okay, so that's our basic structure there. And then the last thing for you all to do is, oh, this one? I'm not sure what you mean there. Oh, this is I'll freely admit I used AI to generate this. I used Dolly to generate it. I think it's just a basic kind of kawaii chibi kind of anime type face. But yeah, I used Dolly to generate this image. Freely admit it, because it looked the way I wanted to. But last thing I want you all to do, and you can do this during the break. We're about to take a break here. Is to head on over to Perennial, which is the API we're going to be using. Again, I'll put the link in chat. There you go. And go ahead and sign up for their API, just the free plan. I'm actually going to do that during the break. I'm going to create a new account and see if I can get a fresh key, because my key is expired based on the number of requests that I've made in the last 24 hours. Oops. Yeah. So I have burnt out my number of requests. And hey, if I can't get a new account, that's okay. We can still build out the code. You can get it working on your end. I already know that my finished version works. So gonna go ahead and take a break. Head on over here, sign up for the free version of the API. Again, not the paid version. Use the free version, and get cooking. All right. I'll see you back here in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and we will return. All right. See you in a minute. right, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back whenever you are ready. Get yourself a glass of water, stretch, use the restroom if you need to, and then come on back. Oh, and also pet your dogs, pet your cats, pet your significant other with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Sorry about that. Is that better? Can you hear me now? I was on mute. I clicked it. I guess I clicked it twice. All right. So, yes, we are back. During the break, I signed up again to the API with another Gmail account. So, we should be cooking fresh again um, and have another fresh 100 requests to this API. So, this is what, after you sign up, this is what the developer page looks like on the API. So we can see it kind of just gives you a very plain sort of a page with your API key, which is behind my little privacy barrier here. So I have a fresh API key now. I've got it copied to another file on my other screen. And so, yeah, we should be cooking again. We should actually be able to set this up and get it running on stream before I run out of requests, hopefully. That's the idea. So if you were able to sign up, it's pretty easy to do so. You should get to a screen like this where your key will be right here. Mohammed says, Mindwolf, are you familiar with Socket.io? I am, and I have made an app with that on stream already. So if you go to my YouTube, just search for chat. I made a real-time chat app with Socket, with WebSockets. So yep, if you want to watch that, you can. I did see during the break there were a couple of comments from web developers saying, I need to memorize this plant API so that I don't need the documentation anymore. Absolutely not. That is a terrible idea, and you should not do that. Documentation exists for you to reference it. If documentation exists for something, there's no reason to memorize it. Especially something like this when it's not something that you're using every day. Don't do that. Yeah, and also code should be clear to read. Like you asked about comments. Code should be clear and easy to read, but comments really aren't going to hurt either, as long as you're commenting on why that piece of code exists. So the importance of comments is to explain the context behind that block of code, not what's in the code. So if your comments can add value if they're explaining why that block of code exists versus just that it exists and what it does. Yeah. Also, if you're learning coding right now, if you're still kind of picking things up and learning, then you shouldn't try to self-optimize too much. You should do the things that are going to benefit. If a bunch of comments are going to benefit your learning more than having fewer comments, then yeah, write a bunch of comments. Do what's going to benefit you most and help you retain the most knowledge. Okay, so we've got our API key here. I've got it copied in another window. Expertchi, welcome. They say, hey, what's 100 devs? That is a fantastic question. So if you are wanting to get into learn web development, to maybe probably get a job in web development, and if you want to do that for free, and I mean legitimately free, no costs at all, 100 devs is a free program that allows you to do that. It allows you to start with zero coding knowledge, and it allows you to then become a full stack web developer and eventually get a job in web development without ever paying. Because when you're learning, you're paying in your time, right? If you're spending time on something to learn something, your time is valuable. You have value and your time has value. So why should you have to pay money on top of that? That's bogus. So do exclamation point 100 devs in chat if you'd like to learn more about it. We have a website, we have a Discord with 30,000 members. And it's a really active community. And the next and live classes, again, free, should be starting up soon. All of the class materials from the previous live cohort are also free. You can go to again, check out the website. On the website, there is a invitation to the Discord. So on that about page that I have linked there, there's a invitation to the Discord. Hop in, see what you think about it. You can also head over to communitytaught.org. Again, that's communitytaught.org, all one word. And that is the website where you can find all the free course materials from the previous cohort. No paywalls or barriers to access at all. And you can start a coding journey if that's what you're interested in. So yeah, that's 100 Devs. It's a nonprofit organization that teaches folks how to code and become web developers without having to pay $10,000 for a boot camp, because that's stupid. I'm not saying that anybody that did that is stupid. I'm saying it's stupid that that's a thing. It's stupid that we have set this barrier to learning and to education that is so high. That is $10,000 to just learn how to code. That's preposterous, and it's predatory, and it shouldn't cost anything to learn these skills. Yeah, absolutely, Expert Chief. Feel free to ask questions if you have them. So how am I associated with 100 Devs? I am kind of a so I'm not the founder of 100 Devs, but I am kind of a partner with 100 Devs. I'm going to be a co-educator in the next cohort for the program. And while we're sort of in between live classes here, I do weekly educational streams on coding topics, building kind of full stack projects like this to help folks build their portfolios and increase and improve their skills. When the live classes start up again, I'll be doing things like helping with homework, teaching some of the lessons, working on office hours. I'm also very active on the Discord as well under the same name. Exactly. Matthias says lots of people from expensive boot camps come to 100 Devs and ask for help because their boot camps are terrible. Exactly. Paying money for something doesn't mean that what you're going to get is any good, right? People can charge whatever they want for whatever they want, no matter how good the content actually is. Oh, thank you. You're a puppy. I'm just here to help. Esther says, how soon is soon? I can't tell you that, Esther, because I honestly don't know. That's not my decision. I wish it was. I wish we could start right now as far as the next live class, but not in my wheelhouse. There's a lot of moving parts right now, but we are absolutely eager to get started on the next set of live classes. However, you can get started on your journey at any point by, again, reviewing the materials from the previous cohort, starting at lesson 1, and picking up from there, going at your own pace. Pylon, thank you so much for the follow. Yeah. Carcer, office hours were not recorded. Thank you for the follow, Expert G. Office hours were not recorded because sometimes people would share, sensitive things or private things during office hours, and so those were not recorded. You're really not going to be missing much. Most things that were done in office hours were then done at some other point, or I did them on my stream. So again, you can look back through my archive as well if you're looking for something specific. I again check my YouTube channel. You might find it there if you're looking for specific homeworks or whatever. Yeah, office hours were more pep talks, that type of thing. Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the project. So we've I hope you've all got your API keys. If you did decide to follow along, it'll be right here on the developer page after you sign up. It'll probably ask you to generate a key. You click that button and it generates a key for you. So I've got mine copied. So I'm going to move away from this page. That. Drag it back over. How much money can we learn as web developers, JavaScript, Node, and EJS? Depends on where you are. I can't answer that. It just depends on your location. You're in, and don't tell me where you are. You don't have to tell me that, but just it really depends on your area. You can I would look at Glassdoor, the website Glassdoor. You can put in your area and you can see what type of salaries web developers make in that area. Glassdoor is good for that. Here, Raytheon, I'll give you the so Raython, go to the Discord. That's one place you should be. But then the other place is that's the other website there. So I put that in chat for you. That is where the actual like course materials are, but please also join the Discord. So two places to be, Discord and there. Yeah. All right. Let me get my notes I rearranged here. Okay, so we've got our oh, I think I put these in the wrong folder. I need to put them in my image folder. Put them here. Maybe they're in there. And then, okay, and then also in my public folder, I'm going to add, why did I need those to go in my image folder? Thank you. Well, come on, VS Code. All right, fine. We'll do this. Cut. And paste. Did that work? Nope. Okay. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, VS Code is so, I hate how it does this. There's probably a way to fix that. But yeah. So in the image folder, you're going to want to put also, so you've got there are two images in the image folder. And then in the public folder right here, you're also going to want to put your style.css. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's a setting to prevent the collapsed folders. Yeah, I probably thought so because that gets me every time. But anyway, so in our public, so we have our style.css in the public folder, and then in the image folder we have our two images. So just keep note of the structure here so that you don't get stuff in the wrong folder. So our image folder contains our two images, and then the public folder contains the image folder and our style.css. So that's the structure. And you can see that in the GitHub code as well. All right, so we've got that. And then in our views folder, let's go ahead and create an index.ejs. So index.ejs. Inside of our views folder. And then in our .env file, this is where you're going to put your API key. Now I'm going to use my old key here since it doesn't work. I'll just show you what that looks like. But in your EJS folder, you're going to declare a variable, and I've just called mine perennial underscore API key. Whatever you call it is fine. You call it API key or whatever, private key. And you don't need to say let or const. You don't need to declare it like you would a JavaScript variable. You just say, here's my variable name, equals, and then the value. You also don't need to put quotes around it like you would, a string or anything like that. Just put the raw key, like so, and declare the variable, set it to equals to your key. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, but then I'm going to go ahead and replace it with my actual API key. So give me one moment to do that. Save. Just a second. Save. All right. That back. So I have gone ahead and set up my API key in my env file. And so now we're set to go. So now we can actually start kind of building out this code a little bit. We've done all the setup. We've got our structure set up. And we're ready to build out our code. We've got everything installed. We've got all of our packages installed, .env, EJS, Express. And now we're actually ready to start writing some code. So any questions on this before we get started? On our structure, on the API, on anything like that? Feel free to ask at any time, but I do like to pause occasionally. Web developer asks, why not renaming? I'm assuming you're talking about the script here. Um, why not rename the start to dev? There's no need to. If I was using NodeMon, I would probably have a separate dev script here. I would have a separate script called dev, and that would be my NodeMon script, and then I would keep this one as start. But there's no need to rename the default script. Just not necessary. You can if you want. I mean, nothing's stopping you. You can have whatever scripts you want, but there's no need. Yeah. Fenton, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. They say, just got here. What are we coding? We're building an app that lets you it lets you talk to an API and figure out the right type of houseplant for your lifestyle. So if you never remember to water your plants, you don't want to get a plant that's going to need you to water it every day, right? Like an orchid or something. You want something like a aloe or a cactus. Or if you get a lot of shade, right? You don't want a plant that needs a bunch of sun because it's going to die. And so this API allows us to build this app that returns houseplants based on your lifestyle. So that's what we're working on. Your wife needs that, all her plants die. Yeah, I was talking earlier. Either my house plants live for a million years or they die immediately. Like there's no in between. Yeah. Esther says, I work at Google Maps API tech service. That's friggin' rad. That's so cool. 90% of the issues we see are people losing their keys and looping through their daily quotas in seconds. Yeah, you can really you can ring the bell accidentally really easily with an API if you're not careful. You can hit that rate limit. Yeah. That's funny. Not surprised that happens though. All right, so let's head into our index.ejs and we'll start building this out. So again, looking at the structure of our application, what are some elements that I might need? Basically just looking, this is the finished application that you see right here on the screen. If I were to code this again from scratch, what are some elements that I might need? $300 a month. Wow. Per second. Okay. Yeah. What are some elements that I'm going to need for my layout here? And again, just because we're doing this in EJS, it's going to render out as HTML. So we're thinking in terms of HTML elements. What are some HTML elements that I'm going to need? Yeah, I'm thinking maybe a form, some buttons. Yes. Maybe a header. Yeah. So some basic stuff, right? The main element that I see on the screen here, yeah, a couple divs to probably split the screen. So if I were to reset this app, we can see that, kind of on the left, we have this form, right? And then on the right, we have an image. So there's probably like a stylistic div. There's probably two divs side by side. Yeah, definitely. A couple divs to split the screen. At bare minimum, if we're talking minimum viable product here, yeah, a couple divs to split the screen, an image, right? And then a form. Sure. Absolutely. All right, so the first thing I can do is I can kind of set up my basic page structure, just HTML5. I'll kind of minimize my terminal here. HTML5, and for my title here, I'll just call it Greener Thumb is the name of my app. And then here in the body, I'm gonna have an outer div, which I'll just call container. Give it a class of container. And then inside of here, I'm going to put my two divs to kind of split the screen. So my left div is going to be, and you can do this as sections as well, whatever your preference is as far as styling. We'll give it a class. So the left one is going to be called form section. And the right one, we can call it, we'll call it, what did I call it? I called it image section. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to split the screen in half. Yeah, and we're also gonna use grid styling in CSS. Yep. So I've got my two divs here, and then in the left div is where I'm going to have my form. So on the left here, I have like a title, and then I have my form. So we'll focus on this div first. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have an H1 for my header. And then I'll have my tagline in an H2. Let's copy that because I can't spell worth a dang. And then I'm going to have my form. This is arguably the most important part. So in my form, again, this is so the form is the most important part of the page because this is how we're actually going to talk to our server, right? This is how we're actually going to talk to our server. So we can see that by default, it's going to give me an action. But I am going to need a few more things in here aside from just the action. So I'm not going to fill that out just yet. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an ID so I can style it. I'm going to call it plant form. I'm going to need an action. And then I'm also going to need a method. So what is the difference between action and method? So the ID is for styling. But what do these two do? You can tell me either one. What's the difference between action and method? What are they each for? Web developer, maybe double check that. What are each of these for? Yeah, Raython said method is how the API is called. How the API is called. So essentially, yes, it's the type of requests that we're making to the API, and there's several different types of requests that we can make, right? So if we're building a CRUD application, where CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete, which is what we're doing, what type of thing are we doing when we're talking to the API here? In terms of the CRUD acronym, what are we doing? Are we creating? Are we reading? Are we updating or deleting when we're talking to the API with this form? We're reading. Yeah, exactly. We're reading. So our method is going to be get. So as web developer said, there's several different methods we can use. We can use get, post, put, patch, all sorts of things. But by default, we're going to use the get method because we are not updating any data with this. We are simply reading. We're simply talking to the API and we're reading data back from it. So our method is going to be get. Now, our action is going to be the route that we are going to pass to the API. And we can call this whatever we want, but generally you want it to be something that is going to be descriptive of what it's actually doing. So I'm calling mine get plants. And this is going to get passed into the URL. It's going to get passed up to the server. So knowing the difference between these is important because the action itself is the route, and then the method is the method by which we're transmitting this data. Web developer, that's actually not necessary. We won't be needing that. A lot of the things that I think it's important. Again, it's important to remember what do we actually need for the form to work. A lot of those things just aren't necessary. You can add them if you want. They're options that we can add, but they're optional. It's all extra stuff. The minimums. It's important to understand the minimum stuff that's actually needed for it to work, right? Versus extras. Why do we have a slash there? Because this is essentially it's a route. It's a URL route. And so if you're passing this in as as a part of a URL, yeah, you're gonna have this you're gonna have that slash there because by default so when we actually run this, right, it's gonna start from a base URL. So when we run it in the browser, just locally, it's gonna start from like localhost 3000. But we can add on to that URL with a specific route by adding specific steps in a path to get to a particular location. And so by default, the basic route is just going to be slash. That will render the home page. But if we want a specific route, then we need to add on to that and add steps in that path. It's kind of like if you're playing like Candyland, right? You're stepping along a board. And so these are just steps on the board. Exactly. All right, so that's the basic shell of our form. And then just again for styling, I'm going to add a div in my form. So by default, no matter what you're doing, an HTML form is going to refresh if if it involves a submission. So we're going to have a submit button on this form, right? Because we're going to be sending data to the server. So by default, the way that HTML works is it triggers a refresh on submit. So it's really the submit action that's going to be doing that. You can override that behavior if you want. You can handle submission with some client-side JavaScript if you want to really kind of handle things. And we do that with React. We always override that behavior if we're using React. But in this case, it's okay if it refreshes. Yeah. Hey, Chandu, if you're interested in 100 devs, welcome to the stream, by the way. No, you're fine, Raytheon. Absolutely. There's no such thing as I don't know. Sometimes people say I have a silly question, I have a stupid question, or I'm intruding. That's not true. Absolutely not. You are absolutely fine. Sometimes I will caution against misinformation, but if you're asking questions in good faith, then absolutely not. You're never intruding, Raytheon. Don't think that way, okay? You're fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry, I'm catching up with chat. Chandy says, what is 100 devs? So you can do !100 devs in chat to get a link to the website, and you can read more about it. It's a great program. It teaches you how to code for free with no cost at any time. Everything is free. So ! 100 devs if you're interested. Oh, thank you, Fanton. Okay. Meseta says, isn't it weird to maybe have action in camel case for a URL, or it make more sense? No, there's no harm in that. I think it makes it easier to read with camel case. Just it helps you tell the words apart a little bit more easily. It's not going to hurt anything when you're passing it as a parameter that way. I think it just makes it easier for like me to read. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right. So in our form here now, we're going to have a few divs. With a class of question. And again, this is just for styling. This doesn't really do anything. This doesn't really do anything with the actual form itself. But I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. How many questions do I have? Yeah, 5. Oh, yes. Thank you for that, Holly. It just depends on the server implementation on how the URL is handled. Yeah. So, I mean, I just think you can format it lowercase if you wanted, as long as it matches what's on the server side. But I think it's easier to read if it's camel case. You can use other tags if you want, web developer. It's not going to hurt anything. HTML is really subjective. You should try to use the appropriate tags for the appropriate things. But again, these divs are just for. So it's important to remember. It's important not to just use a bunch of different tags because they're different. You should try to use the appropriate tag for what you're actually trying to do. So all these divs I'm using, these are for styling. So if you are styling, if I was just doing text here, then maybe I would use a span, right? Or I could use sections instead too. The question between div and section is really one of those things that people get into fist fights about on Twitter, right? But yeah, it's important to just try to use the most appropriate tag for the task. Yep. But it is very subjective because HTML is super flexible, which is a challenge sometimes. All right, so inside of each of these divs, I'm going to have one of my questions. So so let's look at this again. Remember, I'm inside of a form here. What type of a tag should I use in order to make this type of a drop-down box? What type of HTML do I use to make a drop-down? Yeah, we're going to want to use a selector. We're going to use a select tag to create a dropdown, because with a select tag we can add specific options. Okay, yeah, so that's a great. So Layered Cake says input. What's the difference between select and input? They're both very commonly used in forms, and they're both great. But what's the difference between a select tag and an import tag? Well, with a select, you're also receiving data. There's that's there. They both have the user make a choice and they input that data. So I wouldn't say that's the difference. What's the difference between a select tag and an input tag? There is a big difference. Now, again, they're both for users entering data, but what's the difference in the way the data is entered between these two? Yeah, web developer says select is predefined. Exactly. So the difference is they both involve the user entering data, but the select has the data choices limited to what's on this list, right? Yeah, the data choice is limited to what's on the list. But where an input is generally at least somewhat free input, you can limit it to be like numbers 1 through 9 or numbers or text or whatever, but or a checkbox. But select is like you get these choices and that's all you get. You can't enter anything else. Exactly. As Chubby said, select is predefined and input is free range. Yeah. But there are tons of different types of user inputs that you can define within a form. Especially with the input tag, you can customize the heck out of it. So, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff you can do, but in this particular case, select is the best choice. We're using a select box here in our form strictly because we are essentially setting up the URL that we're going to be passing to the API. So in order for us to do that, we need to really stick within a few predefined things. Like this can't be free text entry because the API only takes very specific inputs. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good one for your Anki. That's a great idea, Vaughn. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna add a select tag here, and my first one is just gonna be called edible, because this is going to be the question for whether or not you can eat it. And then I'm going to have in here, I'm going to have 3 options. Option. I can give them values. And I'm going to have, again, 5 questions. So I'm going to just copy these selectors 5 times. And I'll just change the data in each one. Boop. Go. Hey, Goose Rider. Again, web developer. So defining the default, that's something you can do, but it's not something you have to do. It's a yet another option that's absolutely a thing. So you can define a default value, right, if you want a specific one to be selected by default, but it's not necessary. You can also control that in other ways too. So I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So we've got edible is our first one. So our first option that I want to have in the list for the dropdown is going to be just no preference. So they can leave everything blank if they want. It'll just won't get passed in the URL. Next value is going to be yes, and the next value is going to be no. And actually, I can copy this down to the next question too. That'll be valid there. Yep. And so this is the text that the user is going to see. This is the text that the user is going to see. But the value is different. So it's really important to understand that. This is the text that the user sees, but this is not what gets passed to the server. So you can show the user one thing, but then pass something different or more useful to the server. So you can be more descriptive for the user and then actually pass something completely different to the server. And we'll see that here in a minute. So for no preference, I'm just going to pass a blank value to the server. I don't care about this text. I just want to pass a blank value to the server if they don't select anything. If they select yes, then I'll pass yes. If they select no, then I will pass no. We'll see some different options as we go a little farther though. And again, actually, I'm going to do the same thing in the second question as well. So my second question is going to be basically the one about being about poisonous. So this will be pets or kids. Again, no preference, yes or no. And then also too, instead of having like a default value, instead of using the default property, we can actually just do this. So we can add inside of our option here, we can just say selected. So inside of our selector, this first option is going to be the one that's selected by default. So instead of a default property, we're going to use the selected property on our option. You asked if we can give an order to our option tags. You do that by putting them in the correct order. So whatever order you put them on the page is the order they're going to show up in the dropdown. So that's how we do the order for that. It's kind of like, just with HTML tags in general, whatever order you put them on the page is generally the order they're going to display. And so that's how we do that with a selector, is we just put them in the proper order within our HTML. All right, so we've got the first two questions there. And then the third question is going to be the lifespan. And this one's going to show a little bit of that difference that I was talking about in between the text that you showed to the user versus the text that, I skipped one, sorry. Versus the text that you actually send to the server. So our first one here, again, is going to be that no preference value. But then the next one is going to be kind of a funny, silly little thing. How long do you want it to live? Well, I want it to, live forever, perennial. Or for an annual, we'll just say, hey, I'm here for a fun time, not a long time. But obviously, I don't want to send that to the server. That's not data that I need to pass to my server at all. Instead, what I want to send to my server is just perennial or annual, just those words. But again, that's not, I can show that to the user as well, but that's no fun. I want to show them something fun, something interesting, something that's going to engage them and make sure they understand what they're choosing. So I can show them this text, but then actually pass this value to the server. Why not use EJS to loop over this tag and fill these things out based on the data, what we have on our backend? No, there's no need to do that. It's important to think about how hard is that going to be versus this. See, all this data is different, right? I'm going to have different options for each question. I want to be able to really customize those options. Now, we're going to have EJS later on for other things, for really repeatable stuff, or things that have a different number of values that we could be getting back from the server. But for this, I think that would be harder than it would be worth. Yeah. And then for the next question, it's going to be water schedule. And I mean, you can experiment with things both ways, whether you want the server to control it or whether you want to hard code it. But in this case, I think this part is hard coded. It's not going to be expected to change. Actually, it shouldn't ever change. So we don't want to generate this with EJS, right? I want to hard code this part because I want to make sure that when I'm formatting the URL that we're going to be passing to the API, it needs to be the exact same every single time. I want every single user to get the same choices every time. So it should be hard coded. Now, if we have dynamic content that should change based on the user or based on how the user is interacting with the server, then yeah, absolutely, we can use EJS to generate it. But in this case, I want this to be hard coded so that every user sees the same thing. It's like that quote from Jurassic Park. They only cared about whether they could. They didn't care about whether they should, right? Can you do it? Yeah, sure. Should you? Maybe not. All right, so for this question, our first option, again, is just going to be no preference, and that'll be what's selected by default. And then my three options that I'm going to have for watering are frequent, average, and minimum. Okay, but what I actually want to show the user is some more descriptive questions. So for watering, yes, I have a regular schedule. Every so often. And eh, maybe if I remember, but don't count on it. All right, and then the last question is sunlight. So I think you all get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from the finished repo just because I don't want to type the whole thing out. But again, you see how it goes. Um, we have a specific name and ID for the selector. We have our options. The first one is no preference. It's selected by default. First one's full sun. Next one's full shade all the time. And then the last value is part shade or I don't know. But these are the three values that are actually going to get passed to the server. Yeah. So I think that's all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. HTML was invented by a committee, by a consortium. It's maintained by a consortium of people that vote on these types of things, make decisions for the standards for the internet. Yeah. You can look up HTML. You can Google HTML5 or Wikipedia or whatever if you want to learn more about how it gets maintained. Okay, so this is kind of the form side of our page. So we've essentially just what we've done here is we've made the left side of the page. So this part here. But our form is okay. It's technically complete, but what else does my form need? So my form is missing a couple of elements. What else does it need? We've added all the selectors, but if I were to run it right now, I would still be missing some stuff. What else do I need for my particular form? Yeah. Wow, both of you got it right away. Both things. Missing two things. The first one is probably well, they're both important, but one of the important things is we need a submit button, right, for our form. Because I mentioned earlier that in order to kind of trigger that data to get sent to the server, we need a form, we need a button on the form, and specifically a button of the type submit. So you just adding a button to your form, just a plain button to your form, isn't necessarily going to make it behave the way it should. That button needs to have a specific type, and that type needs to be submit. That submit action is what triggers that page refresh. It's what triggers it to send the data to this path, this get plants path, using the method that we specified. So it's going to send it to our server with the get plants path and the specific get method with a submit button. There's other button types you can add to a server, to a form, but this is the one that triggers that behavior. All right, and then the other thing, which Bernice mentioned, was we're missing the text for the selectors, right? So if we look back at this form, not only do we have the drop downs themselves, but we also have some text that explains, kind of asks these questions to the user. And each of these questions is basically associated with one of these selectors. So what tag do you think I should use for this text? This text that is deliberately associated with a particular dropdown. What do we call that? Yeah. Specifically, this is a case where we do have to use a very specific tag. Yes, and that specific tag is the label tag. Now, technically, I could use something like a span for that text. But why am I saying that we should use a label for this task? Why? Why do I say that? Yeah, it's for accessibility. Now, why? Yeah, web developer, you're right. So the label is that specific label tag is very important because it is vital for people who are using accessibility tools to read a web page, such as a screen reader. A screen reader is generally used for people who have low vision or no vision who are trying to navigate the web. it reads aloud what's on the page. Using the label tag tells the screen reader what element of the page that label belongs to, or that text belongs to. So it's able to say, oh, okay, I am a label for this specific selector. So we're going to add our label. We're going to add our label for each of these. And the only attribute we really need to fill out here is we need to say label and then for, and then we specify which form element it belongs to. And then we show this text to the user. So this essentially says, hey, this label is specifically for this form element. So if someone's using a screen reader, they will know that. Now, visually, right, if we're looking at the page with our eyes, we can see that just based on the context and how the page is laid out. But people who are using screen readers have no idea. They don't know where anything is. They have no mental image of that layout. And so they need these types of attributes, these types of tags to tell them how the page, quote unquote, looks, how it's designed, what's the layout. So this is really important. So I'm going to grab my labels here and pop them onto each of my questions. Lifespan. Watering schedule. And the sunlight. Okay, so that's our form done. Yeah, that's true. Using the appropriate tags also gives you a better Google Lighthouse score. So Lighthouse is how Google ranks pages, essentially. How good Google thinks your page is, how well designed Google thinks your web page is, essentially. Like, what is does Google approve of your web design or not? And so you can run Google Lighthouse yourself on your own website using the inspect ability in Chrome or Edge, I assume. Especially, I know for a fact in Chrome you can do that. And so you can I have a stream on that from a couple months ago where I showed you my portfolio page and how to get a perfect Google Lighthouse score. So you can check that out if you're curious about Google Lighthouse, how to get a better score. I walk through exactly how to run Lighthouse, how to improve your score, how to understand your Lighthouse score, because yeah, that kind of thing is important in how your web page ranks, especially if you're working for a client. Yeah, I believe my stream was called "How to Get a Perfect Google Lighthouse Score" or something like that. Yeah, there's web apps for it. There's lots of different ways you can, kind of manage that that score. All right, so that's the left side of the page. And now we're going to head over to our image section div down here. And actually, we're going to wait on this. I want to get the server side done first so that we know what data is getting passed back from the server, because this is going to be the EJS part of the page. This is going to be the EJS part of the page where we're taking the information we're getting back from the server and we're turning it into stuff on the right side of the page. So we're turning it, like, we're going to get back a list of plants and we need to render those out as HTML on the page. So it'll be replacing this big splash image. And actually, I'm going to see if my new API key is going to work. Just run this wide open. We'll see. Oh, I think did I replace? No, I didn't. Did I replace my? I didn't replace my API key. Hang on. In the finished version. 1 second. Again, schizophrenic web developer, you say, I need to memorize all the available HTML tags. Again, you do not need to do that. Don't memorize this stuff. You really don't need to. You can have like the tags you use regularly memorized. Like you should know when to use you should know when to use like a form tag or when to use an H1 or an H2, but do not memorize. You should never commit yourself to memorizing everything of anything. That's way too much time to spend on something specific. Yes, thank you, Drunk Cocoa Grandma. I did upload that to YouTube. Let's get a perfect lighthouse score. That's the stream. Yep. Give me 1 second to restart this this app here. Do. All right. I'm gonna reload this bad boy. This should have my new key. Yeah, you can always look up a tag. Again, that's what documentation is for, my friends. Let's see. Yeah. All right, let's try my new tag or my new key. Sorry. Hey, check it, baby. So I've got my new API key running here. And so, like I mentioned, we've already done this part of the page. This other side, this right side, is what we're going to be using EJS for. So I want to get the server side done first, and then we'll code this part out. So we'll come back to our index.ejs once we've built our server. Only 99 requests. I know, I'm being real careful. I'm being super careful. Yeah, you gotta it's a I mean you guys aren't gonna ring the bell. I was basically playing yesterday I was basically playing around with a bunch of stuff, and I thought that the API request like refreshed at midnight. I just thought it was like a like a midnight type deal where it would refresh my API request, but I guess it runs on like a 24-hour cycle. So yeah, I kind of shot myself in the foot there, but you guys will be fine. Yeah. Hey, feel free to count down if you want. But all right. So we'll save this. I'm going to save my index.ejs, and we're going to come back to this div right here after we build out our server.js. All right. So I'm going to pop over to server now. I'm in server.js now. And we're going to start building out our server. Okay. What are some basic things that I'm always going to need when I'm building out a new server with Node and .env and Express, and just in general? Yeah, I'm going to need to declare some of my packages, right? I'm going to need to initialize Express. Import stuff. Yeah, yeah. Or in this case, we're going to require them. What's something else I'm going to need? So we're gonna set up all of our packages, right? What's the most basic thing I need for a server? What's the most basic thing I need for a server in order for that server to actually work? Doesn't matter what packages I'm using. Yeah, exactly, Robico. A port. Yeah. We're gonna need to actually do an app.listen and get our port running. Yep. So that's a pretty good summary, I think. So we're gonna go ahead and these things, I mean, you can like kind of, if you want to build out a server template, I would actually recommend that once you understand what each of these things are, I would build out just a standard server template so you don't have to do this stuff every single time, because otherwise you'll just do it every single time. So you can build yourself a template and like store it on your GitHub, and just anytime you need it, just fork it down, and um, you'll have a starting point for your own server. You can set it up however you want, but so much of this stuff just gets repeated over and over and over again. And that's the thing that you start to sort of realize as you do this more and more, is it's just, I mean, it all follows a pattern. You're going to be doing something different, like the purpose of the app is going to be different, but you're going to be using the same elements over and over and over again. So why not make it easier on yourself and and build a template? I even have a couple templates on my GitHub, if you want to place to start. I'm going to set up 5,000 for my port here. All right. And then I'm also going to, nope, a lot of those things we aren't going to need at all, web developer. Again, a lot of those things are optional, not needed. It's all about minimum viable product, my friend. Yeah. So our app.listen is essential, as Hollylux says. Yep. So for that, we can have that at the bottom. And we're going to have it listen on the port we specified. And I also like to do this. This isn't particularly necessary, but it's useful for logging, like we were talking about before. We're going to say, oops, server running on, and then our basic port. I'm going to copy this. Oops. put an extra parenthesis in there. Hang on. Oh, extra. There you go. Yeah. Okay, so this is useful just because it tells us that our server is actually running. It's just a little visual indicator that our server is running. However, it's not strictly necessary. In essence, all you really need is the app.listen and then your port. All right. So we've got that. Now, the next thing that we need in order for this to work is, since we are using EJS, what do we need to do? If we're using something other than static HTML to render out our finished product in the browser, what do we need to do? What do we need to tell our server? We would use app.render when we're actually rendering the page, but that's a little bit ahead of we're a little bit ahead of the game there. Yeah, we need to actually set a view engine. We need to set a view engine. We need to tell our server that, hey, I've got some logic running on the client side that's going to have, there's going to be a little sort of a middleman in between the server and rendering out the HTML. I have some logic running on the client side to actually turn this data into HTML in the browser. So I need to explicitly set a view engine. Now, you wouldn't need this. This would not be necessary if you were just using HTML. You would not do this if you're just using HTML. However, I need to specifically say, hey, server, you're going to be sending data to EJS, and then EJS is going to render that out as HTML in the browser. Yeah. And also, what's something else I'm going to need? Since I have some static assets here, right? I have a style sheet, I have some images, I have some stuff that isn't just kind of hanging out, you know, aside from a plain HTML page. So what else do I need? We are going to need to handle the form request. That's correct, but a little ahead of ourselves there. What in just talking about the basic structure of our application to help the server understand the basic structure of our application. What's something else I need to tell the server about our application? If I have some images and I have some style sheets hanging out in a particular location, what else do I need to tell the server? Yeah, I need to tell Express I need to tell it essentially where those static files are. I need to tell it, hey, I've got a public folder and it's got static files in it, like my images and my style sheet. I need to explicitly tell it where those are. Mm-hmm. Location, location, location. That's exactly right. I need to say app.use express.static. Again, we're talking about static files here. And then they are in a folder called public. And this is all kind of boilerplate standard stuff. You're going to see this in, I mean, this is extremely standard server language. So you should absolutely know what each of these things are for, why they exist. And then, you know, you can kind of have a template set up, or you can copy and paste it from a file if you want to. I mean, definitely know what each of these are, but you're going to be typing them out every single time, so you can copy and paste them from one project to another. All right. Now we can talk about actually what we want to render when the page first loads. So when the page first loads, when somebody visits the home page, I want it to go ahead and render our index.html. So I'm going to do an app.get. And for my path, for my route, I'm just going to pass in a slash, because the slash just indicates, hey, we're at the home page. And since I'm using a method here, I have two parameters, rec and res. What do those stand for? What does rec and res mean? This might give you a clue. I'm going to say res.render. Yeah, rec and res stand for request and response. So request is the data that's coming up to the server. Response is the data going back down. Now, in this case, we're not sending any data up to the server. There's nothing coming up from the home page. We're just processing that path without any additional data. However, the response is going to be actually the page that we're sending back down to the browser. So render, we're going to render our index page. And we're also going to be passing back some data, but we're not going to fill that out just yet. So we're going to render our home page and we're going to pass in some data. Yeah, it's basically inbound, outbound. So that's going to be our render. Actually, no, I'm going to fill out this data. So I'm going to fill this out too. So I'm going to have two elements that are going to get passed to the home page in an object, plants and message. And for the home page itself, like when somebody first visits the page, both of those are going to be null. But after they submit the form and they get data back from the API, then those are going to be populated with the data that we get back from the API. Either it's going to be an error message or it's going to be some data about plants. So we still have these elements here because EJS is going to need them in order to render the page, but both of them are going to be null. So we'll see how that fits together with the logic when we get there. And yeah, we'll take a break in a minute. I just want to kind of get through a couple more things and then we will. Render that out, message. We've got our listen set up. Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think this is decent enough time for a break. We've got kind of the basics set up. The next thing we're going to do when we get back to this is we are going to do our API call. So we're actually going to build the URL based on the form data that we're sending back up from the homepage. We are going to build the URL that we're going to be sending to the API. And then we're going to handle the response that we get back from the API, and we're going to pass that data back down into our front end. So we're going to kind of set up that communication line with the API. Thanks, Matthias. Thanks for coming. All right, so 5-minute break. I'll see you back here in 5, and we'll get cooking with the API, and y'all get to test your API keys when we come back. folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back whenever you are ready. Get yourself a drink of water, use the restroom, get up and stretch, pet your dog, pet your cat, pet your significant other with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Okay, folks, welcome back. Good to see everybody here again. Let's get right back to it. So, prior to the break, we just finished setting up kind of the skeleton of our server, but now we're going to actually talk to the API. So, when we talk to our API, we're going to need to set up a URL to pass to that API because we're contacting an external service. So, we're going to need to send an external URL, and this is something that you can actually build yourself by hand in the browser if you want to. Remember, we have we have documentation. I need to make sure I'm not going to expose my API key here. Go to the API docs real quick. We have documentation that tells us exactly how to build this URL. Come on. There we go. And so you could build the URL by hand and test it in the browser. So this is going to tell us essentially all of the possible parameters that we can put in the URL. So that's what we're going to do. We're essentially going to put in the proper parameters, build the URL, and then send it to the API. All right, so I'm reading data from the API. So this is going to be another GET request, app.get. And the path that I'm going to use to trigger this request to the API, does anybody know what path I'm going to use? What path should I use in order to trigger a request out to the API? I'll give you a hint. It's a path we've already set up. And if you think about what triggers that API call, that should give you a clue about which one we should use. First, I'll ask this. What triggers, in the context of this app, what should trigger a call to the API? What triggers that API call? What action by the user? It's a user triggered action. So what triggers the call to the API that the user does? What does the user do to cause that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's when they click the submit button on the form, right? Yeah, the form submit. Okay. So the server is listening for that form submission at what path? What path are we sending from the form to the server to trigger that related to that submission? Yeah, get plants, exactly. So if we look back at our form, they click submit, this path gets sent to the server, and then that route should trigger the API call. So we want to use the same route here. So when that form gets submitted, it gets routed via, server says, hey, a GET request came in on the get plants route. I need to make an API call. Okay. The one true path. Yeah. All right. So also we are talking to an API. So what type of function should this be when I make my API call? What type of function should I always use when I'm talking to an external system, whether it's a database or an API? Async, baby. Yeah. Why async? Every time. Why async? Polite function. Yeah, we got to wait for that data. Exactly right, Fanton. Yep. We got to wait for the data. Yep. Because we don't know how long the API or the database or the external system is going to take to respond. We have no way of knowing that. So we need to wait for that data to come back before we do anything else. Exactly. Yeah. So in this case, it's not the user that we're waiting on. We're waiting on the target, which is the database or the API. Yep. Yeah. It's essentially async await is just a fancy promise. Yep. All right. Now, first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to build our URL. So the format of our URL, the basic format of our URL is going to be this. So I'm going to start with a base format. And this is just literally how the API is expecting the URL to look. So at very least, it's expecting https://perennial.com/API/species list. And this comes straight from the documentation. So this is literally copy paste from the documentation. And then the next thing it's expecting is your API key. And for the key portion of this, I'm just pulling in that variable from my .env file. So I'm saying, hey, grab the key from the .env file and insert it into the URL. So it'll just be formatted as a string. And then the last default parameter I'm adding here is indoor equals 1. So essentially, the only thing I want back from this API are plants that are classified as indoor plants, because that's the whole purpose of the app, right? We only want indoor plants. We don't want outdoor plants. Well, I mean, it could be indoor, outdoor plants, but we only want plants that are possible to grow indoors. So like, not like, I don't know, an oak tree or something, right? We only want indoor plants. So basic URL right here, and then one more parameter of indoor. But now on top of that, I want to add all of my additional parameters that are coming from the form. So on top of this basic URL, I'm going to also add a bunch of the parameters that are coming from the form. So I'm going to declare a bunch of different variables here for the all the variables we're getting from the form. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the form data. So I'm going to say params, and I'm going to say rec.query. Okay, so what are we doing here? Well, remember that rec and res mean request and response. Rec, res, request, response. So in this case, we are passing data up from the form. So there's going to be all that form data in rec, in request, coming up from the client side into the server. So I'm going to get that data out of the request object by saying rec.query. So what this is going to give me is literally just a big old object with all the form data in it. Okay? So if you were to console log params, what you would see is a big object with all the form data in it. Everything that the user selected just in a big old JavaScript object. So now that I have that stored in a variable, I can access it in each of the individual elements. Okay, so my first variable is going to be edible. And I'm going to say, all right, I want to see if the user said that, if the user selected yes on the form for edible, the user selected yes on the form for edible, then I want to set the edible parameter in the URL to be 1. So I'm going to say if params dot edible is equal to yes, then I'm going to have a URL parameter of edible equals 1. If they didn't choose yes, then I can ignore that and not add anything else to the URL. So what am I doing here? What type of expression is this? Yeah, it's a ternary operator, right? Essentially a one-line if-else statement. I'm just saying, hey, if they said, I want to make sure I can eat this plant, then I want to add an edible parameter to the URL. Otherwise, I don't need to. So I'm just setting up a bunch of variables right now. It's going to make it easier to construct our URL a little bit later. Next one is going to be poisonous. And I'm going to say params dot pets kids. And again, this is just pulling from the form data. If pets kids equals yes, then poisonous, I want not poisonous, so poisonous equals 0. So poisonous equals 0, else nothing. And the reason I know what these values should be is, again, it's all in the documentation. So the documentation has specific parameters for edible, poisonous, yes, no, that type of thing. So it's all in the docs. And let's see, next one is the cycle. So I can say const cycle params.lifespan. So essentially for the cycle, if they chose any value at all, then I'm going to just pass that straight in. Cycle equals whatever, and add the value. Otherwise, nothing. So you can kind of see where we're going with this, right? We're just setting up each of the individual URL parameters. I'm going to copy and paste the other two. We're doing something similar for watering and sunlight and setting up each of these values. If they didn't put anything, if they didn't make a selection in that box, then we're essentially just leaving it blank. We don't want to add anything to the URL that we don't need. And so each of these is going to be blank if they didn't make a selection. Otherwise, it's going to set the appropriate parameter. And then once I've done that, I can just take each of these variables and append them to my URL as parameters. So I'm going to say edible, poisonous, cycle, can't spell, cycle, watering, and sunlight. Okay. Oh, good catch. Line 17, yes. Yeah. All right, so now if you were to console log this URL, and we're actually going to do that, we're going to console log our URL when we test this out, you'll see that the actual string that gets created is the URL with the API key and the parameters that we've built here based on what the user has actually selected. So that's how we build our URL. And then the next thing we're going to do is actually send this URL out to the API and see if we get a response. So if I'm going to be talking to an API, I am going to need to use await. That's correct. I'm going to need to use await. But what's something I should always generally use if I'm talking to an external system and I want to make a request, but I'm not sure if that request is going to work? And it's not necessarily with an external system either. If at any point I'm doing an action and it may or may not work, what should I do? Yeah, I should probably use a try catch block, right? Why do we want to use a try catch block? What does that do for us? What are they good for? What do we use try catch for? Reading says it's easier to handle errors. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Yes, exactly, Raython. You're exactly right. They say it's essentially it handles errors gracefully. Exactly. It essentially makes it so that when we get an error, we're not just going to crash. That catch block is going to say like, oh, I know exactly what to do if I get an error. I'm going to console log it, and I'm just going to keep on trucking. Right? We're not going to crash. we're going to be able to be like, oh, well, the app can still keep running, but we are going to need to, do something with this error data. Yep. It's a graceful handling of it. Exactly. Correct. So try catch. Try catch blocks are really common, and very useful. So for our catch part of the try catch block, it's going to be pretty standard. At the very least, you're probably going to want to console log the error. We're going to do, if we get an error, we're going to console log it, and we're also going to send that message to the user without showing them a big gnarly error. We're just going to say, hey, something went wrong. There was an internal server error. So we're going to just re-render the home page with a message that says internal server error. And we saw that earlier, right? You saw that message when my API key expired, and it just couldn't get a response. So the try catch block worked exactly as expected. And it just it went to the catch, it logged the error, and it sent a message to the client side saying internal server error. So it worked exactly as designed. But at minimum, you're going to want to at least do a console log. So in our try catch is where we're actually going to do the API request. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to console log the URL we're sending. So what URL are we sending out to the API? Just to so we have it, so we know. And then I'm going to go ahead and call it out and say const response. And if I want to, what am I going to use to actually see if I can get data from the API? What function am I going to use to see if I can get data from the API? We're going to use a wait because we're going to be waiting on that data, but how do we do it? How do we get it? If I want to, I don't want to say the word. If I want to capture that API data, yes, we're going to do a fetch, right? Hey, that's awesome, Quirky. Congratulations. Congratulations on the cat book. I know you've been working on that for a while. Yeah, it's based on one of my old projects. It's awesome you've been able to take it to fruition. Yeah, we're going to just do a fetch. Fetch used to be something that you had to install separately. Now it's built in. So it's nice. We can just use that. Just do a fetch. We're going to wait on that. We are going to make fetch happen. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to take that response and parse it as JSON. And I'm going to sort of just type out this last thing, and then I'm going to explain why I'm doing it, because this is really particular to this particular API. So you're going to generally always have to do these things, like these two things, no matter what API you're talking to. But this next thing I'm going to do is really specific to this particular API. So the less than nice thing about this API is that it has a free tier and then it has a paid tier. And some of the data is paywalled, which is just the worst. I hate paywalls so much. But I mean, hey, at least they do have a free tier, right? They have a free tier, so don't flame them or anything. They're giving some of their data for free, but some of it is paywalled, but they still let you retrieve it, which is the less fun thing. So if you have a free API key, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, you can pull back this result, but we're just gonna like obscure half the data, and it's just gonna have an annoying message on it. So I want to filter out any of the paywall data because it's just going to say stuff like upgrade. It's just going to be like, upgrade your subscription. It's just going to have a bunch of text in it. It's going to be useless to us. So if I want to, essentially what I'm getting back from this API is it's going to look like this. It's a giant object with a bunch of different results in it, right? So we can see one result here, ID 1, ID 2, etc. So it's going to look like this. It's a giant object. So if I want to exclude certain records, if I want to modify an object to exclude certain records, Tiger, thank you so much for the follow. What method could I use to do that? just in general, in Java, basic JavaScript sort of memory knowledge, if I have an object and I want to take that object and modify it to exclude specific records, what method would I use to do that? What's an object method that I can use to modify an object, loop through it, and get rid of specific records? Yes, so you did say it, drunk Uncle Grandma. I'm going to use filter, right? We could use maybe MapReduce, maybe, but there is a built-in method that can do it, and it's filter. So if I want to filter out a specific keyword, I can just use the filter method to do that. So in this case, I'm going to filter out any of the specific like upgrade keywords, because if basically what it does is it says, instead of like the word, like perennial or watering, frequent, it'll say just cycle, and it says like upgrade your subscription, upgrade your subscription, just in the text here. So I can easily filter those out, and then what I get back is just valid data that is usable on the free tier, rather than just the word upgrade a billion times. So in order to do that, I can just use a simple object method filter, and I'm going to take my data that I got back from the API and just say const valid data. I'm going to go into the object. So data is my response. I'm going to go into the object, and inside that object is an array called data with multiple objects in it. So I'm going to say data.data filter. And then for each item in there, I'm going to look for the word upgrade and filter it out if it's in there. This is just a tedious thing that I had to do for this API because it's janky. You won't have to do this with every API that you're using. This is just a really weird API, unfortunately. I wish it was better, but it isn't. So essentially all I'm doing here is I'm looping through what I get back from the API, and I'm saying, hey, if the cycle, watering, or sunlight includes the word upgrade, I don't want it in my result set because it's going to be useless. Spam me through a mesh filter. Sure, whatever floats your boat. So now I'm filtering out all the records that are going to be useless, and then all the data that I have left should be good. So, oh, that's a great question. Why do I need the exclamation point in front? Great question. All right, chat, what does the exclamation point mean in JavaScript? If I see an exclamation point in front of something, what does it mean? Not. Yeah. So, exclamation point or bang essentially means reverse whatever is next to it. So in this case, all the stuff inside the parentheses here should be reversed. So what are we doing here? Well, we're saying, all right, check to see if the cycle item includes the word upgrade, if the watering item includes the word upgrade, and if the sunlight item includes the word upgrade. And in this case, since we have the also too, the pipes here mean or. So if cycle or watering or sunlight includes the word upgrade, right? And then we're reversing that with the bang. So essentially, the only items that make it through the filter are items that do not include any of these words. So the bang reverses this to say, hey, filter out, only allow items through the filter that do not include the word upgrade in any of these fields. Okay? Because in the filter properties here, we are specifying the items that we will allow through the filter. So any item that makes it through the filter cannot have any of these words in any three of these fields. Does that make sense? I know it's a little confusing when you start, reversing stuff like this, but it's really the easiest way for us to say, hey, not includes any of these items. Okay, great question. So now we kind of have our valid data, but it's very possible that filtering out all of those, invalid records, all these upgrade records, might have left us with no remaining data. It's possible we could get 3 records back and none of them are usable, or that we've filtered all of them out. There's nothing left. So we do want to do a check and say, hey, if valid data has anything in it, we only want to try to render the results if there's anything to render. Okay, so we're going to check and see, is there anything in there, and does it have a length greater than 0? Only then do we actually want to try to render it as valid results for the user. Hey Tiger, they say, I have a quick question. I want to be a full stack developer. I do a lot of projects in HTML and CSS, but JS is hard to stand to me. What do you advise? Think keep doing that project until I understand. What do you think? Yeah, definitely. I would check out. Are you in 100 devs, Tiger? Are you in 100 devs right now? I would definitely, if you're not in 100 devs, I would check that out. It's a very comfortably paced course. It explains things really well, and it's free, to kind of help get you up to speed, more comfortable with JavaScript. But yeah, practice is definitely a good idea. JavaScript is confusing when you're first starting it. I mean, look at all this, right? Look at what we're doing right now. This is not easy. This takes practice. But I would highly suggest just keep working on it. I would highly suggest just keep working on it. And I mean, I know you're probably busy, but check out some of the lessons at that'll really help you get your mind around JavaScript so you're not just spinning your wheels. So check out communitytaught.org, check out some of the lessons on JavaScript, and see if that might help you out a little bit. But yeah, definitely keep going with JavaScript. JavaScript is worth knowing, because it'll really help you add actual logic into your websites, right? Actual interactivity, help users being able to submit data, being able to talk to users, being able to make decisions based on how users are interacting with your HTML, right? So that's the true power behind web development, is JavaScript. So I would highly suggest you keep practicing at it, and get some help. 100 Devs also has a really active Discord if you want to ask questions there. There's a lot of really helpful people there if you want to ask specific questions on the Discord. But yeah, that'll really unlock the power of web development for you if you can kind of start getting your head around JavaScript. All right, so if after this filtering, if we still have data to display to the user, if that length is greater than 0, then we're going to go ahead and re-render the index page. Oops. And we're going to pass that data down to the page as an object. So we're going to send that data from the server. And so we're going to send our valid data back down. And I only want to send 3 results. I don't want to send more than 3, but you could set this to whatever value you want. So I'm going to say slice 0, 3. So just grab the first 3 results that we get back. But you could have this be 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever you want. I just have it set to 3 because that works with my layout. And there's no error message, so we don't need to send anything there. Sending the data back down, sending the first 3 results with no message. However, if there is no data to send, then we want to let the user know that. So we're going to still re-render the index page. But this time our plants array is going to be empty. And our message is going to be basically, hey, please, make a different selection. So if there's data to send, we send that data, or the first 3 results of it. If there is no data to send, then we give them an error message or a, a different message to tell them what to do. Esther says, what will happen to the catch up crew when the new cohort starts? It'll still be there. People can go whatever pace they want. They can do the previous cohort. It's not going to go away. Nope. We want to accommodate everybody's styles of moving through the cohort. So it could be that people are like, hey, I don't have time to do the live classes right now. I just want to take the previous cohort and go really slow. You know, I'm working 2 jobs. I've got kids. Perfectly fine. Catch up crew will always be there. We love the catch up crew. Yeah. Hashtag catch up crew. Holly says, why are you checking for valid data before checking the length? This is really just, this could probably just be valid data dot length greater than 0. I think I was trying to remember why I did this. I think I had an issue with, first I was just checking the length. And then I think I had a thing with like a empties or empty array or something like that. I don't remember exactly why. It could probably, I would have to experiment with this a little bit to remember why I specifically did this, but it really is just making sure that we actually have data to send back down to the client side. So you could experiment with this too. You could just say, you know, you could try one or the other and see what happens if you ever run into an issue. Because I don't remember strictly why I did this, but it had something to do with the response I was getting. Because I built the first draft of this like back in January. So there's some stuff I'm like, oh man, I'm sure I had a reason for this, but it was, 6 months ago. I've been sitting on this one for a while. All right, so we got our catch. And got that. All right, so we got that set. We're rendering the right thing. Now, the last thing I want to do here is just, again, it's a sort of a little extra thing. Let's think about this. Let's say I'm a user and I'm using the form and I want to basically, I just want a lot of different results to look through. I want to say, okay, well, maybe I run it once and I say, all right, I get a lot of shade. So I choose the shade option. I see the first 3 results. I'm like, I don't like those. I want to get some different results. Let's see if there's more. And so I want to run it again and again and again. And we could add like pagination or something to this. But for now, I think what I want to do is just make it so that the user gets a different slice each time they submit the form. So if they choose the same form results again, I want them to I want to mix it up. I want to shuffle the results a little bit so that they get more of a variety of responses back. So the way I can do that is I'm just going to drop in a shuffle function, and then I'm going to shuffle the results so that they get a different slice every time they submit. And in order to do that, I would suggest just copying this from the GitHub repo. This is a very standard shuffle function that I'm using. You can Google and get this right now, but this is just a standard random shuffle that you can use to shuffle an array. Essentially, and you don't have to look into this too deeply, but essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the array, we're looping through it, and we are swapping array elements at different points. We're just moving through the array and we're swapping things around randomly. So what you get out of that then is an array that's been fully shuffled, all the elements moved around. So it's going to be random each time. You can see we're doing a random here, and we're just shuffling each element with the one next to it until we loop through the whole array. Well, we're shuffling each element with another random one in the array. So we're setting I, we're doing a loop through, backwards through the array, and then we're setting J to a random value and swapping those 2 values between each other. So again, this is a standard shuffle that you'll see. I think I've used it before in a few different applications. So you can kind of just drop it in and use it if you need it. But what we're going to do here is once we've kind of filtered our results, then I'm going to call this shuffle array function. And before I pass it back down to the client side, I'm going to shuffle it so I get a random slice each time. Renate says, I didn't know you could swap array elements like that. Yes, you absolutely can. Yep. Yeah, so what we're doing here on this line is essentially taking these 2 elements and reversing them. Now and I genuinely don't remember. This has a name when you do this. What is this called? Does anybody know? I can't think of what this is called, but you can do this with array elements. Yeah, that's right. It's just destructuring, isn't it? Yeah, it's destructuring. So like you can do this with variables and stuff too. Yeah, we're destructuring the array. Yep. So it's kind of a cool little shorthand that you can use. Yeah, it is magic, right, Renitz? Coding is magic. We are all wizards, right? You're a wizard, I'm a wizard. We're all wizards when we do this sort of thing. Web pages are magic, and we have magic in the palm of our hand. Isn't that cool? All right, so I'm calling the shuffle. I'm passing the data back to the front end. And if there's no data to render, we pass the message. If there's an error, we pass the error. Okay, I think we're all set on our server. I'm just double checking. I think we've got all the elements we need on our server. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now that we're actually passing data from the API back down onto the client side, I'm going to head back to our index.ejs and we're going to finish that. We're actually going to write some EJS now. Previously, all we've done on our excuse me, all we've done on our client side is just write HTML in an EJS file, right? All we've done is use HTML tags in our EJS file. But now we're going to head down here to our image section and we're going to write some EJS, my friends. Hey, Grizz, good to see you. How's it going? All right, so in here in our image section div, we're gonna let's think through the logic a little bit. So if we've sent a request up to the API and it didn't return any results, or we got an error, what did we say we want to do? What do we want to show? What do we want to give to the user? If there's no results or if there's an error, what are we doing? Just thinking in terms of the user experience here. If there's no results or an error, what are we doing? If there's no results or an error, let's go back to the server. Let's figure this out. Res.render index. So if there is data, we send the plant data, right? We send the first three results. Easy peasy. However, if there is no data, or if there's an error, what are we doing? Based on this res.render statement, read these, and what are we doing if there is no data in our plants array? Yeah, Megalite says we're sending a message, right? Yeah, so obviously we want the user to see that message. So if there's no data in our plants array, we want to show them a message instead to tell them what happened. Hey, something went wrong. It's okay. Like, do this. So the first thing I'm going to do in my logic here is I'm going to write a little EJS to say, hey, if the value in plants, essentially, we're going to say, if the value in plants is not null, then do something else, show them that message. Okay? So if plants is not null, and I'll just put a placeholder here for now. If plants is not null, we'll just say, do something. Else, we want to show them that message. Else, close paren here. Else, I'll just have a paragraph tag here and we'll just display the message for them. This is the message we're passing straight from the server. Okay. So if plants is not equals null, obviously we're going to show them the results. But if there is a message to display, we want to show them that instead. Yeah. And actually, let's think about this even a little deeper. What if what do we want them to see when they first go to the homepage? Like when they first open the app. When they first open the app, we don't want to show them an error message, right? Because they haven't sent anything to the server yet, so there's nothing wrong. What do we want to show them when they first come to the homepage? What should they see? Yeah, we want to show them actually the first time they come to the homepage, we want to show them the default image, right? We want to show them the image here on the right. So we're actually going to need another level there. So the first thing they want to see is this image. And then if there's a problem, then we want to show them that message. So essentially, first time they get the image, no plant data, no message, they get the image. They talk to the server, they don't get any results. We show them the message. Then if there are results, we show them the results. So essentially, we're going to kind of need 3 levels here of if else statement. So we're going to need one more level. So I'm going to tab this in for now. So actually, our first level if statement here is going to need to be this instead. So at the base level, we're going to say this. If there's no plant data, there's no message, we want to show them the default image. However, if there is some data, then we're going to check and see if the length of that data is greater than 0. So that's going to be our second check. So if there is some value at all and that data is greater than 0, then we're going to show them that check. We're going to show them the results. If not, then we're going to show them a message instead. All right, so our next level is going to be, all right, fine, there's data, but is the length of that data greater than 0? Okay, so first check. Is there even any, did we get anything back from the server yet? No, we haven't talked to the server yet. Okay, show them the default image. Oh, we did get something back from the server. We do have a value in plants. Is its length greater than 0? Then yeah, we're going to show them the results. No, we're going to show them the message that we got back from the server instead. Okay. So let's say we did get data back from the server. We do have some information on our plants. Then in that case, we want to loop through the information we got back. Oops, caps lock. And for each one of those values, I want to create like essentially a card. So depending on how many values I got back, I want to create a card and I want to format it with like a header, a picture, and the information about the result. So I could get 1 result back. I could get 3 results back. If I change the amount of results I'm sending back from the server, I could get 10 or 20 or 30. So I want to loop through them and do something no matter how many results I got back. So if I want to take an array or an object and I want to do something no matter how long that array or object is, what method would I use to do that? Thinking about JavaScript here. We're doing EJS, so we can use JavaScript methods. What's a way that I would generally do that? Yeah, I would probably use a for each, right? For each element in this array, in this object, whatever, I'm going to loop through it and do something, no matter how long it is. All right, so I'm going to say plants dot for each plant in our plants array. I want to create a div, and that div is going to have an h3. It's going to have oops, it's going to have the image of the plant, and it's going to have just some paragraph tags for the life cycle, the watering, and the sunlight. So essentially, we're going to loop through each item, and we're going to put the information in each one of these tags. Okay? Now, I know this is kind of visually confusing, and unfortunately, that's kind of how EJS is. EJS, adds some kind of confusing visual elements to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put kind of each one of these in here, and then when we're done, we'll kind of talk through what these visual elements are doing. So my outer div here is just going to have a class of plant. That's going to format my card just for styling. And then for my H3, I want to display first the common name of the plant and then its Latin name. So I say, all right, show the plant common name, and then have a parenthesis, and then show the scientific name. And if there's more than one, just join them together with a comma. So the confusing thing about EJS is that you are mixing HTML tags with JavaScript functions, right? And methods. You are mixing HTML and JavaScript, which can look kind of messy. But all we're really doing here is we are taking the information we're passing back from the server, we're going into that object, and we're extracting each of the properties that we have gotten from the API. So I have a common name property. I'm going to grab that value, and I'm going to show it inside of the H3. And then I'm going to have a parenthesis, and then I'm going to grab the scientific name. If there's more than one, I'm going to join them together, and I'm going to display all of that information in the H3. Okay? And if there's an image that I got back from the API, then I want to show that. If not, I want to show a default image. Remember earlier we grabbed this placeholder image and dropped it into our code file here. So if there is an image, I want to show it. If not, I want to show a default. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just saying, hey, if a default image was provided by the API, then create an image tag, set the source to be that image, give an alt value of the plant name. Otherwise, still create an image tag, but just add in the placeholder image that we have stored in our local file here. So the next element is our image. And then the last three are just dumping in the life cycle, watering, and sunlight. So again, what EJS does is it allows us to use JavaScript inside of what appears to be HTML. However, it's important to keep in mind that even though these tags that we're using, all over this page look like HTML, they really aren't. EJS is not HTML. It's essentially JavaScript that renders out to HTML in the browser. So all of this stuff will render out as HTML, but these tags are EJS. It's templating, exactly. Yep, it's a template engine. Okay, and it looks like I missed a parenthesis somewhere, but that's fine. Just put that, there we go. Okay, so let's walk through this logic once more. Essentially, hey, Have we gotten any response back from the server? Is there any value in plants that's being returned by the server? If not, it's probably the first time they visited the page, so just show them the splash image. All right, but let's say, okay, we do have some kind of a value in plants. So if its length is 0, then show them the error message or show them the saying, hey, no results returned. So we're going to show them that. If we have data in plants and the length is greater than 0, we want to loop through each of those items and essentially set up the appropriate HTML tags. So H3, image, and life cycle, watering, and sunlight. So we're going to set up each of those cards, then show them to the users. Yes, EJS is a templating engine that renders out to HTML in the browser. Exactly. Thank you, Executo. Raytheon says, so something like old school lightweighted JSPs instead of servlets. Yeah, unfortunately I'm not familiar enough with Java to tell you that, but maybe somebody who is has knowledge of Java could confirm whether that's the case. But yeah, templating engines. I mean, there's a lot of them in the JavaScript world. There's EJS, there's handlebars. There's a bunch, but they can be useful for kind of semi-static pages like this, where you don't necessarily need like full React functionality where you got a bunch of stuff going on all over the page. If I had, full dynamic page generation based on a ton of interactivity, I would probably just use React. And we could use React. We will probably convert this to React, maybe the next stream. I think that would be fun to take this EJS page and convert it to React, because I think it might almost be simpler in React. I don't know. But it might be fun. So, there's a time and a place for a templating engine versus using something a little bit more robust like React or Next. Yeah. Yeah, Pug's another one. Mm-hmm. But hey, it's whatever tool you're comfortable with, right? All right, so I think we're set there on our EJS. And we're cooking. Yeah, so I think that's basically all that we needed to do here. We've got our form. We've got all of our form elements. We've got our appropriate submit action. We've got all of our questions. Oh, last thing here, something really important to remember. Whenever you're building a form, so we talked about the importance of labels. And so, we associate a label with a particular form element by making sure that we have our name value set, so that it's associating this for value with the name value in our form element. But also, what's another reason why we need to have this name element on our form? So it's used to associate with the label, yes. But what's another reason why we need to have the name element declared within our form? Aside from the label association, what's another reason? Let's give folks another couple seconds, see if they, because this is a mistake a lot of newer developers. um there you go. Yeah, Sagama, thank you. Yeah, so this is a mistake a lot of newer developers make, including myself. When I was learning this caused me hours of frustration because I didn't have a name element in my form element. So like I was trying to, I had a bunch of input boxes on a form, and I was trying to pass data, and it just like I just couldn't get anything to the server. I was like, my form is perfect. What's going on? Everything is the way it is. Like what's going on? And essentially, you need to think about forms in terms of they are an object. When you click submit on a form, it's going to bundle all that data up into an object, and it's going to pass that object up to your server. So what are the elements of an object? Obviously we have the curly brackets, but what makes something an object? How is it different than like an array? specifically in JavaScript. Yeah, we've got key value pairs. That's true. It is unordered. That's correct. Um, but the main characteristic of objects in JavaScript is key value pairs. So the key value is kind of like the column header in a table, right? It's going to be the same for everything in it. It just kind of tells you what type of thing is stored there. The value then is the specific sort of mutable text that's stored in that specific key. So when a form is bundled up and it's sent to the server, this name field is used as the key in that object, and it tells the server what is that. Hey, here's a bucket where something is going to be stored, and that bucket is called edible, or that bucket is called pets kids, right? So it gives a name to that data bucket, and it tells the server where it can go to retrieve that data. So if you don't have the name field, it's not going to work. You're going to get an empty array sent to your server. So when we you can test this yourself. If you go to in your server, what you can do is you can, right when you fetch the data from your form, I would suggest console log params, right? So we have const params equals rec.query. We're grabbing that data, that form data, that object. We're storing it in a variable here. Console log params. Yeah, console log params and see what you get. What you're going to get is an object with a bunch of key value pairs in it. And those key value pairs are going to be, say, like edible, and then edible is going to have a specific value. Pets kids, and then pet kids is going to have a value. Lifespan is going to have a value based on what the user selected. Water schedule, sunlight. And all of these names align with the names that we set in our form. So edible, pets kids, lifespan, water schedule, sunlight, etc. So essentially what we're doing here is we're telling the server the structure of our data. We're giving that data a structure. Yeah. It just essentially tells the server where to find the data that it needs. Hololix said, can you console log headers content type 2? I mean, yeah, you can console log whatever. You can console log as much as you want to get the kind of the format of your data. Um, are you? I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Are you asking if that's possible to do, or are you asking me to do it? Sorry, I'm just making sure I get the context of your question. But yeah, you definitely need. I've like I said, as a new dev, when I was first learning this stuff, I was pulling my hair out because I was like, my form is perfect. What's wrong? I just didn't have what I needed. Oh yeah, yeah. So you can do console logs on the types of data that you're passing through. You can do yeah. I would suggest that that you do that. Console log when you're first learning this stuff. Absolutely, console log the crap out of everything. You're not going to hurt yourself, if you console log too much stuff. You can always remove some console logs later. Just see what you're getting. Um, I recommend that for like events too. Like console log events sometime and see what you get. It's fun. Console log for days. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Anyway, what was I thinking about? So we finished this. All right. So and again, um, that's kind of what we're doing here, except in reverse. So we sent all that data up to the form, right? We've processed it in the server, got data back from the API, and and our server also sent back an object. So we retrieve that object, and then we dig into the key value pairs in that object to map out all the tags we're going to need to display the information. Yeah, it's the best way to debug it. Absolutely. Yeah, and there's libraries that can help you validate your data and stuff like that. Um, I would recommend as you're learning though, just console log it, get your hands dirty, get in there. Um, you know, don't get too reliant on a bunch of libraries and packages, and don't get too high level too quickly, because you'll lose the sense of what's actually going on, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we're about done. The last thing we would just really need is some styling, and as I mentioned before, I'm a back-end developer. So I use ChatGPT to help me build my styling to make it look the way I wanted. I have no shame about that, my friends. So I'm just going to drop in the styling from the repo so it looks decent. And then we're going to see if this bad boy runs. All right, so what I have running over here, this is the finished version, and so we're going to see if we can get our version running as well. It's probably not going to work the first time. Honestly, if I was more thoughtful about this, we would have been kind of testing as we went. We would have seen if we could get a response from the API, etc. But I didn't, so we won't. Okay, save this. All right, so what do I do if I want to start my server? First try. Oh, I don't know about that. We'll see.
First try.
A little soon for that, I think. I'm sure. What do I do if I want to fire up my server? How do I start my server? Okay, hey, I don't know. That's a valid answer. Let's say I truly didn't know how to start my server. How could I figure out? How could I figure out how to start my server? If I didn't know, let's say I'm using an unfamiliar repo. I didn't make this. Yeah, what's a way I could tell? I could look at the package.json file, right? I could look at the scripts in there. I could open my package.json and say, hey, are there specific scripts in there to do specific things? And right here, I can say, oh yeah, check it. There's a couple different ways I could start my server. I could either do npm start, or I could use node server.js. Whoops. Or I could do node server.js, right? Yeah. So either one of those two are going to work. I'm going to do npm start. Hey, so there's the first step. My server is running. That's something. I didn't immediately get an error. Hooray. Yeah, you could also Google it as well. But if you're using a very specific repo that somebody else made, I would suggest looking at your package.json and seeing what scripts they may have defined to do certain things. Because they may have a separate script for dev operations versus like actually running the server in production. So they might have like an npm dev script. They might have an npm start. They could have a test script to do various things. So check your package.json, see what they've got going on there. All right, let's open this here in the browser. Okay, awesome. So I love this. This is great. Fantastic. So our page rendered, but there's no styling. So what did I miss? What did I forget? If you see this, what should this immediately tell you? No troubleshooting required. Yeah. Well, I have a CSS file. It's right here. I have a CSS file. It's right here. But as Copperlily said, the simplest answer is probably the correct one. I am missing a link to my style sheet. So all I need to do is simply add a link to my style sheet, and I think I'll be fine. Now, just kind of a minor thing here, but as if you'll recall, I have my EJS file inside of my views folder, right? It's in views, whereas my style sheet is inside of the public folder. So they are technically in two different folders. But if you'll notice, I don't have to specify that. Even though they're in two different folders, I don't have to specify that. Why? Why doesn't it care that they're in two different folders? Hmm. Yeah, because my index.ejs page is being rendered by the server, right? The server's in control of rendering it. And we told the server explicitly where my static files live. And my static files live in the public folder. So it knows exactly where to look already without me having to tell it. It also knows exactly where to look for the images as well, right? Because my index.ejs can access these images even though, again, they're in a completely different folder because I told it, hey, any static files, this is where they're going to be. Just look there. So it doesn't matter where else I am in the app. If I'm trying to access a static file, it's going to know exactly where to find it. So that's why we do that. Yeah. Oh, Sagama, I'm glad that's helpful for you. Yeah. So that's another common mistake. I mean, I just made it, right? You forget to link your style sheet, you forget to put it in the right place. But now if we reload this, we should have styling. Hey, look at that. Beautiful. So we now have styling. Let's see if we can talk to the API, shall we? So I'm just going to run it wide open. Nope, no selections. Let's submit. Ah, first try, baby. New follower. Thank you, thank you, Odilon Talk. Thank you so much for the follow. First try. Yeah. Hype. Yeah, you picked a good time to pop in here. We just finished building our app and it worked on the first try. So, yeah. Yeah, so now let's see if we can make a selection. So, let's do, okay, I'm going to do like, hey, I don't ever remember to water my plants. So I'm going to pick this option. Hey, I don't water my plants. Let's see if we can get a cactus. Yay, we got a cat. We got desert plants. Ooh, that's pretty. Thank you for the hydrate. I know I didn't. Why? Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't water myself at all. So yes, that's perfect. Thank you. So yeah, we're getting valid responses back from the API. I'd like to see if maybe we can trigger to make sure the default image is gonna work if there is no image to the thing. So I'm just gonna do. Let's do. Actually, no. I'm gonna do. Just kick this again. Okay, so in this case, this is interesting because I know that this particular plant does have a valid image because I've seen this result before. So it looks like maybe it doesn't have an image that's this specific size. So we could refine the logic a little bit here to be like, hey, if no image exists for like the small image size, maybe we could use the thumbnail instead. So we could have a little bit more conditional logic there to be like, hey, if there's no small image, use a thumbnail, because I know this does have one. I've seen it before. But yeah, all right, here we go. So this particular plant legitimately doesn't have any images that we could use. So it's using our default image instead. That's perfect. So yeah, little tweaks here and there that we could do. But overall, it seems to be working as expected. And so, users can make as many or as few selections as they want here, submit. And then I think the next feature, we're not going to do this today because we are out of time, but I think the next feature to add here would be to make it so that you can say like, oh yeah, this is a pretty plant. I want to use that. They could click on it and then it can make a second request to the API to get the really detailed view of that specific plant. Because if you recall, there's a couple different ways that this API can be accessed. You can get kind of a plant list like we're getting here, or you could make a very specific request for one single plant and get a ton of information about it. And so that would make sense to see like, oh yeah, that's pretty. I want to do that. You click on it and then it, gives you a whole page of information. So that would be a great next feature to add to this if that's something you wanted to do with your version of this application. But yeah, we crushed it, I think. Pretty good, huh? So any questions on this? Again, you can use this code. This is free for you to use as much as you like for whatever you like. Um, it's out there on GitHub, exclamation point project, if you want the finished project. Uh, yeah, play around with the API, add features, add, more information on the page, make it click through so that users can click on a plant and get a bunch of information about it, add an additional page, add a menu, add routing, add a favorites list, whatever you want to do. Um, the possibilities are endless. This would be a great portfolio project. Um, I'm sure there's many of you out there who can style things way better than I can. So you could make it pretty. Yeah, I was very excited about this project back in like January, which is when I started building it out. Um, and yeah, eventually I never got a response back from the owner of the API about like, hey, can you just like, is there a way to filter out all this upgrades? Like, is there a way I can format my URL to just not give me any of the upgrade crap? They never responded to me, so eventually I was just like, fine, I'll build my own filter, and I accessed it that way. So yeah, I do think it's a good API. It's a little clunky, it's a little finicky, but it does have a lot of good information in it, and this would be a fantastic project for your portfolio. Any of you out there, feel free to use this, make it much prettier, do it in React, whatever you want to do. Hey, Raytheon. Yeah, so currently I stream every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Now, next Sunday, I do have a conflict, time conflict. So I will be starting later. I'll probably be starting at 4 p.m. Eastern or a little bit later. I always post on Twitter prior to, like, I'll post on Twitter the day of my stream, and I will uh, basically say what the topic of the stream is going to be and any schedule changes. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to see that information. I'm just Mayan Wolf on Twitter the same way I'm here. I'm Mayan Wolf everywhere, if that helps. Mayan Wolf on Twitter, Mayan Wolf on all platforms. Um, and yeah, so that's my general schedule is Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern. Follow me on Twitter for schedule changes or time changes. My schedule's been a little disrupted this summer just because I injured myself and that I had some conflicts and family things, and but in general that's the idea. My schedule may actually increase. I may be streaming more once the next 100 devs cohort starts up, hopefully here pretty soon. I may be streaming more than once a week, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week, but we shall see. We'll see how things go. Yeah, I hope you do convert it to React Layer Cake. Absolutely. This would be a great project for React. I know there was a little bit of discussion I saw earlier uh, in the chat about using React versus using something like EJS. And I mean, there's different schools of thought, right? Some people just use React for everything because technically you can use React to build static pages. Um, you could use React for a project that has some static pages and then some dynamic pages. Um, and there's really technically nothing wrong with doing that. It's just kind of your preference and what you're comfortable with, right? So for me, I tend to do if I know I'm building a static project, I'll just do it in HTML, because I don't need to use React. And if I have a mostly static project with a little bit of interactivity, maybe EJS. But if I'm building it's more of like a tipping of the scales thing for me. If I'm building a project with more interactivity than staticness, then I'll use React. But really, it's a personal thing. Yeah, as Holly says, there are people that start by learning React. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. You should probably not have React be the first thing that you learn. You should probably learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript first. Like learn how to do those. You learn how to use those vanilla and how they work, and then migrate up to React. And then, yeah, if you want to switch over to React full time, go for it. But you should understand the basics first. Why React works the way it does, and then yeah, eat your heart out, knock yourself out, use as much React as you want. But hey, it's in the end, all this stuff is subjective. It's all made up, and the points don't matter. So do whatever helps you learn. Do whatever gets you a job. Do whatever keeps you fed. Right? Capitalist says, I like how you build a basic project then refactor with the fancy stuff. Yeah, because it's kind of like you don't really appreciate the fancy stuff until you understand how it's working under the hood. So the fact that I'm using HTML and EJS and CSS doesn't mean I don't know how to use React and Tailwind and Bootstrap and frameworks and stuff, but it's more of like just to show you that you don't really need any of that stuff. Yeah, it makes life easier, absolutely, and I love using those things. But do you have to use those things? Is because Twitter and social media is always telling you that you need to learn the newest best framework, and if you're ever going to be successful as a web dev, you need to learn you know blargleblurg or whatever the newest framework is. Otherwise you're never going to get a job, you're never going to be successful, you can never build a portfolio without blargleblurg. But that's really not true. You can build a portfolio with HTML and CSS if you want to. My portfolio is built on plain HTML and CSS. I mean, what else do you need? I'm rocking it like it's 1995, mindwolf.com, baby. And it's got a perfect lighthouse score. Yeah, exactly. The newest and best framework changes literally every day. So the best thing you can do for yourself is learn the concepts, actually build things, and understand why things work the way they do, and then you'll be able to learn whatever framework you want. Yeah, and if you have something you're passionate about learning, like Next.js, whatever, go do it. But you should understand the fundamentals first. You should be actually building things, not just constantly learning tutorial hell. Build your own projects, get yourself out there, and then learn whatever you want. Icon, I love that. They say Icon says my port is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and they are a lead software developer. So yeah, and I mean I say this a lot, but like I'm a senior dev and I use a language that was created in 1977, SQL. So it really hasn't changed much since then. I mean, yeah, they add features to it, but like SQL is SQL. It does what it does, and it's just no ORMs, no fancy frameworks. I write raw SQL for my day job. I'm just, you know, just speaking face to face to the database, no interface, nothing, just raw SQL against the database, and that's how I make my living. So I really like to sort of I'd like to sort of remind folks of that, of the value of that, of being like, hey, look, you don't need anything fancy. You can still get work done and be successful without having to learn the next best layered framework thing. Yeah. But yeah, we gotta. I'd like to take a few minutes at the end of every stream to then sort of discuss whatever we want, have a little conversation for a few minutes, decompress a little bit. We just finished a big project, chat, whatever you want to talk about. I'm game. Holly says MySQL versus Postgres, which is better? Um, None of it's better. SQL just has a bunch of different flavors. Different flavors of SQL can be better depending on what you're trying to do. I will say, so I mean, Postgres is, well, I can't even speak. You know, it can get really nuanced and depends. Certain flavors of SQL handle certain database operations a little better than others, but none of them is better than any other one. Um, Otherwise, they wouldn't exist, in my opinion. So, for example, in my career, I've used. I started out learning Microsoft SQL, so like TSQL, um, and then I moved on to. So now in my current job, I use PLSQL, so Oracle SQL, PLSQL, and but for like any projects that I do here on stream with SQL, I use Postgres because it's open source and free. So I want things to be free. I've bounced around between three different flavors of SQL in my career, and they all get the job done. Yeah, sometimes they'll have different keywords or commands or abilities, but none of them is better than any other one. You're not going to go wrong learning any flavor of SQL. So I get asked that a lot. People are like, oh, should I learn oh, I should learn Microsoft SQL. Oh, I should learn Postgres. What should I learn? What flavor? I don't know what to learn. Learn any of them. They all follow the same basic rules and guidelines. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called SQL. They have to, in order to be called SQL, they have to follow a certain standard of syntax and language and stuff. They can have different features, but they have to follow that same sort of language syntax to be called SQL. So learn whichever one you want, and you'll be able to bounce around between them and learn the nuances as you go. Exactly. Learn one, you'll be able to pick up any of the others. I have had no difficulty transitioning between. I mean, some things are annoying, right? The way that PL SQL handles dates is bonkers, but like those are little things. You can still do all the basics the same across every single version of SQL. I would say that if you're teaching yourself, if you're not learning for the job, Postgres is great because it's again completely open source and free. Yeah, Postgres MySQL. You can go online right now and pick those up. Set up your own instances. Do whatever the heck you want. Um, I really like if you want to set up your own databases. I really really like Supabase, which uses Postgres. It makes it really easy to spin up a database and host your own database. So I mean, if Supabase offered me a sponsorship, I would immediately take it, and I would sing their praises from the mountaintop. I kind of wish they would, because they're great. So that's a great place to start. Yeah. Mohammed says, "How about Mongo? Mongo is fine, but just keep in mind it's a completely different type of database. So MongoDB is document based, whereas all these flavors of SQL I'm talking about, they work with relational databases. So you're talking about table based databases, which are relational, versus document based databases, which are object based. And so do keep in mind they're generally used for very different purposes. So I use MongoDB on stream to build projects all the time. Uh, but it works very differently and it serves a very different purpose than a relational database. Yeah. If you're curious about that, I would suggest reading up a little bit on the different types of databases. And, you know, again, I'm not going to say that one of them is better than the other, but relational databases and object based databases or document databases serve different purposes and they're better at different things. Um, so that's another good thing to know if you're interested in getting into the back end is what each of those different types of databases are for. I will say that relational databases like traditional table, row, column, tabular data, those are by far more common than document based or object based databases like MongoDB. In general, any big company or product or business is going to be using probably a relational database like tabular database under the hood just because they've been around for 50 years versus Mongo, which has only been around since like the 2010s, mid 2000s. So, you know, it's if you learn SQL, you're probably going to have a better time getting work with databases versus just only knowing Mongo. Yeah. Actually, I think because SQL was created in 77, but I think the relational databases have been around even longer, like tabular based databases. They're not the first type of database that was ever conceived. The first type of database that was ever conceived was hierarchical, so like a tree structure. But tabular is definitely the kind that caught on. Yeah, so very old. Uh-huh. Yeah, computers. You got to think about what year it is, man. Computers 50 years ago, surprisingly, was only the 70s. Yeah, 50 years ago was like 1974. So computers have been around since the 50s, and more mechanical computers have been around way earlier than that. Yeah, 20 years ago is always 1980. I know. I know. I know. I know. I'm a millennial, and that's how my brain works. Yeah. Oh, 101 1970. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So at work, that's so funny you mentioned that, Holly. At my work, we have so much data with like a start date of 0101 1970. It's great. Yeah, because we have a ton of data that was ported from old mainframes. Yeah, and so it's all got the 70s start date. Classic. Yeah, big old COBOL mainframes. Yeah, good stuff. Actually, a lot of my coworkers actually started out working on those mainframes. Um, they started out doing COBOL programming on central mainframes. Like two or three of my coworkers, that's how they started out. Now they do SQL. Now they work with SQL, but they started out in COBOL, which I think is pretty cool. a couple of them started out with punch cards, doing punch card work. So you had to punch holes in a card, and that's what you fed into the computer. Yeah, I know, right? It's so cool. There's always the fear of dropping the stack of punch cards, and then you completely have screwed up all your data. Yeah. Charlie work, yeah. Well, actually, so I know somebody who actually their job when they were in college was they would so people the students would for their programming classes the students would have to punch their own punch cards, so literally putting a hole in like a card, like a note card, physical holes in a card, and then they would have to put them in the right order in like a box. And then so they didn't have their nobody had their own like computer terminals. You had to take the cards to the computer to feed them into the computer because the computer was in a big room. And so you have to take it there, you have to take it to a room, feed it into the computer, and then wait on the result, and then get the result back on paper, and you know hopefully you got the right result. And so I know somebody who actually their job was to ride a bicycle with big crates of punch cards to take them from the people that wrote the punch cards to the computer, and then bring the results back. And so what they did is that they just had like a big milk crate on their bike with all these punch cards in it, and their greatest fear was like falling off their bike and dropping all these cards. And so what they would do is they would draw, like, so they would have the stack of cards, they would put the stack of cards on its side, and they would draw a big like slash, a big diagonal line across the side of the cards, so that if they dropped them, they can know what order the cards were supposed to go in, which I thought was really clever. I was like, yeah, that's so smart. And then I actually talked to somebody else who used to do that too. And I told them about the drawing the slash thing. And they were like, why didn't I ever think of that? I wish I would have thought of that when that was my job. Which I thought, it's just, I don't know, that stuff is just so cool. How today our computers are so ingrained in our lives that it used to be such a challenge to a real like there's a real barrier to entry to even interacting with computers just a few years ago. Icon said, my dad taught us DOS in the 80s. Yeah, actually, unfortunately, I never had that kind of, I wish I would have had that kind of, you know, education like in computing growing up. I really didn't. I didn't pick up any of that knowledge until much later. But that does show you that, I mean, there's no bad time to start, right? I didn't start coding until I was years out of college. I'd always loved computers and computer games, but it was all self-taught. Like I was all, just like figuring out what does this bit on the computer do, and can I, how do I use a cheat code in a game, like that type of things. But yeah, it just shows, I mean, yeah, there's no bad time to get started on this type of knowledge. My first OS was Windows 95. Yeah, I did use an Apple II in elementary school, but my first home operating system was Windows 95. Yeah. I actually have the Windows you can't really see it, but I actually have the Windows XP background on my monitor right now because I like it. See, it's beautiful. Pretty. Yeah, it's the XP background. Microsoft, for the Windows XP anniversary recently, Microsoft released high res versions of the XP background. My first home OS was Windows 3.1 on DOS. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's wild how much space used to be, usable and acceptable on personal machines. Definitely. Yeah, and how much you could still accomplish with low powered machines like that. Thinking about the computers for the Apollo program, right? A lot of those, it was amazing how optimized those were because they were still computers, but they were extremely low power, you know. And a lot of some of the logic in those Apollo computers was literally hand braided. Like they had weavers, women who were trained as weavers to literally weave the logic circuits into the computers, like manually weaved logic, which I just think is so cool, like braided, braided logic gates and stuff like that. Yeah. If you're ever curious about that, look up the weave logic of those Apollo computers. It's a masterpiece of engineering. Yeah, there's a lot of support. Again, it comes back to like learning the basics, right? There's all these frameworks. Thinking about it in terms of web development, there's all these frameworks and stuff that that Twitter tells us we have to learn in order to be successful web developers. And yeah, really, you don't need it. Like, go back to basics, understand that, and then you can learn whatever frameworks you want. Yeah, and also in terms of NASA, they did learn, use lower powered stuff that they knew worked, right? Think about all those space probes. Think about Voyager. Um, and all the the rovers and stuff, and the space probes that are still operating after decades because the computers were low power, simple, and reliable. And like, they just, if they broke, there's a redundancy, and you don't need something super high level and complex because that gives it more opportunities to break. So absolutely. Hey, Raytheon, I'm so glad. Yeah, that's so exciting. And one thing I would suggest for you, Raytheon, as a fellow backend developer, is to build for fun. When you're getting into the front end, when you're trying to experiment in that space, just think of something fun that you want to do. Like, what would be a silly project or a fun project that you want to just be like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could, I don't know, get some new coffee varieties or something like that, or help, categorize recipes from my family, or something, just, I don't know, something silly or fun that's personal to you, and be like, I wonder if I could build an app to do that, like to help me, look through all of my family recipes based on the ingredients that I have in my fridge. Do something fun like that, something that's personal to you, to your hobbies or things you enjoy. And that'll make it more palatable for you to get better at front end development. um, yeah, because I mean, anybody can do this. It's just, but the hard part is to actually do it, to not get yourself wrapped up in so many tutorials, that you never build anything of your own, and then you never develop any passion. Because passion is kind of the secret ingredient to actually learning these concepts. It's not how many tutorials can I do, it's, can I build something that excites me enough to power through the parts that suck? Because there are parts that suck. Can I power through the parts that suck long enough to actually get the knowledge that I need? I think one of my favorite quotes is actually from the show Adventure Time, um, and it's by Jake the dog in Adventure Time, and he says, "Dude, sucking at something is the first step to being actually kind of good at something. So you have to be able to power through the suck part in order to get to the part where you're actually kind of good at it." And so the trick to powering through the first part is actually being excited and passionate and interested in what you're trying to learn. Yeah, don't do tutorials, do your project instead. Find something that you're interested in and be like, hey, I want to build an app to do this. And that'll work for you. That's why a lot of the stuff that I build here on stream is weird, it's zany, it's fun. It doesn't always work totally right, but what it's doing is it's giving me motivation, which gives you motivation, which makes it fun and less of a drag. Yeah, exactly, Coppola. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Is they just recently fixed a bug on the Voyager spacecraft, which is currently, I believe, the farthest man-made object from us. Like, it's literally, it's outside of our solar system, and not only is it still transmitting, they were able to fix it remotely when part of its like transmitter stopped working, which is freaking nuts. And this thing is like, Voyager 1 is like, how old is it? Like 30 years old, 40 years old now. It's wild. Yeah, and just like I was talking about earlier with like the code that I build here on stream, start with my code. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to build from scratch. But the crucial part is that you customize it to make it your own somehow, right? So like the thing we did today with the house plants. You're like, well, okay, I like that. I like the idea of a houseplant finder app, but I want different criteria to search by. Okay, fine, take it and change the criteria so that it works for you, so that it's interesting to you. That's fine. Yeah, late 70s, exactly. So it's 50 years old. Voyager is almost 50 years old and still cruising outside the solar system. It's wild. That's why we learn the fundamentals, because NASA built a robotic space probe that's 50 years old and still transmitting data outside of the solar system, and they were able to repair it remotely. It's insane. Exactly. Yeah, I think I read something recently where, there's some of the code that was included in Voyager like wasn't even properly, like they don't even have the documentation for it anymore. Like they have no idea, like it's so old that they just didn't have like the any standards for documentation or anything back then. And so, and like all the people that wrote it are, some of them are still there but they don't remember, and some of them have left NASA or died, or and so there's a big concern that like it's just going to become unknowable at some point. I think so. I think they had to do when those most recent issues with Voyager started happening, they actually had to do like a certain amount of reverse engineering to be like to send what they had to do was they had to basically do like a trial and error type thing. So they sent a request to up to the probe to say like, okay, what kind of response do we get back? I don't know what the code is here, but I'm going to send the type of response and see what I get back, kind of like a sonar ping to be like, hey, okay, what do I get back? Do I get anything? What response do I get? To try to figure out the logic of the code underlying the responses. Yeah, it's wild. There's a really great article in Ars Technica about it. I'll see if I can find it real quick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. But I don't know. It was a fascinating read. Um, yeah. Oh yeah, here we go. I found it. This is a great article if you're interested in this stuff at all. Yeah, yeah. Check that out. It has some great pictures of the computer that's actually on Voyager, and how it's completely basically analog. Yeah, and it says that they're like, not to be morose, but a lot of Voyager people are dead. So the people that built the spacecraft are not alive anymore, and all the documentation is on paper. So you have to literally dig out binders to try to figure out what's going on. Yeah, and in each time they send a command up to Voyager, they have to wait 2 days to get a response. Yeah. So each command, so no matter what they send, it takes 2 days for them to get any kind of response back because of the transmission time. And so yeah, it's insane. I love that article. It's a fantastic read. All right, let's go ahead and find someone to rate, shall we? I'll get it pulled up and then we can choose. Alrighty. All right, I think we rated Team Vash last time, so let's pick someone different. Preferably in the software and game dev space. So we'll select same category here. And if anybody has any recommendations on someone they'd like me to raid who's online right now, feel free to shout it out. Oh, we got Coding with Strangers. We got to raid them. Okay, Coding with Strangers is the best. They are a fantastic human and they are funny as hell. So we're going to raid them. No question. Sorry. Taking no input today. We are rating Coding with Strangers, my friends. All right. Enjoy. Show them some love. They're fantastic. All right. Rating now. Oops. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Start raid. All right. I will see you all next weekend, probably at 4 p.m. Eastern. And raid starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And raid. See ya.